across sectors and borders while ensuring data privacy and security. This one we have developed the AU Data Policy Framework, which was adopted last year, and we have started its implementation this year. Fifthly, we are working on building and modernizing digital ID systems that are inclusive, trusted, and interoperable. On this, we will realize this through the AU Interoperability Framework for Digital ID that have been developed and adopted during the summit last year. Finally, we are also working on putting in place measures to mitigate the risks associated with digitalization while optimizing on the benefits. To this end, we are working on development of a continental cybersecurity strategy. These are some of the areas we have embarked on at the continental level as the AU Commission on the implementation of the digital transformation strategy. I look forward to hearing from the panelists on the implementation progress of the digital transformation strategy from Member States, REX, AUD and EPAD, as well as the World Bank, which has also been accompanying us on this journey. I thank you.
Thank you, Moses, for this update on the implementation of the digital transformation strategy, with endorsement of key frameworks such as the data policy framework and also the digital ID, with the interoperability framework for digital ID, and highlighting that a number of other frameworks are being developed and will be examined by the policy organs this year or next year, namely the sectorial digital transformation strategies and also the harmonization strategy and cybersecurity strategy. Now it is my pleasure to call Mr. Michel Rogy, who is Practice Manager, Digital Development for West and Central Africa within the World Bank. He will speak on the World Bank support towards digital transformation in Africa. Mr. Rogy, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Suhila, and good morning again, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed Dr. Kazura. As my colleague Moses just recalled, the African Union's digital transformation strategy creates a unique momentum over a 10-year period to collaborate and act to accelerate digital transformation. And this is precisely the topic of today's event, and I'm very pleased to share some of the contribution of the World Bank to illustrate how important this agenda is for all of us. We need, in fact, to increase collaboration between governments, the private sector, multilateral institutions like ours, but I'm very pleased to have my colleague from IFDB sitting close to me, to coordinate strategic approaches, harmonize policies, and mobilize the financing that is needed. And there is a huge amount of financing that is needed. If you recall the UN Broadband Commission report of a couple of years ago on connecting Africa to broadband, we have 2/3 of Africa that remains to be connected to the internet, and the amount of financing just for the broadband network is estimated at around $100 billion, out of which we would need to have 25% public catalytic financing so that private sector engage in this infrastructure development. So we have all a huge role to play here to achieve the vision set in the DTS that we have all the continent online by 2030. So at the World Bank, we are supporting actively the operationalization of the DTS. We have called that the Digital Economy for Africa initiative. So if we Google World Bank Digital Economy for Africa initiative, you will land on the public website. And one of the first outcome of our work, joint work with countries that you will see, are the Digital Economy Country Diagnostics Report. We've been conducting 35 of them. The objective is to have all continents covered by end of this calendar year. And this report that we've developed collectively with the government, the private sector, they sketch out how are the priorities to be set for each country to accelerate digital transformation. So like the DTS, we look at the foundations of a vibrant, safe, inclusive, and sustainable digital economy. So the digital infrastructure, meaning the broadband and the data infrastructure, the digital financial services, because it's all about transacting online, the digital platform, public platform, so that we can bring services at scale, digital ID, cybersecurity, government to payment, government to people payment, the digital skills, because it's not an easy endeavor to bring everybody online. We need to have the capabilities to do that. And the digital businesses, because it's all about creating growth and job opportunities on the continent. So on the World Bank side, we have been working very actively, as I said, in terms of developing our financial support across the continent, so the coverage of the DTS. We have so far invested 8.2 billion in digitalization projects, and we intend to do more in response to our client requests, both at national, regional, and continental level. In terms of the priorities where we really believe the focus should be, we have three main areas of attention. The first one is really the core of this, the subject today, closing the broadband infrastructure gap, both for the missing links, so that we have a resilient fiber optic infrastructure across the continent, but also invest in areas with no coverage or unprofitable areas where the private sector would not be ready to go alone, and public catalytic funding is needed. It also includes market development reforms and policy support on infrastructure sharing, improving spectrum availability, as well as looking at new themes such as of handsets, because we know, you know, that this is, as broadband coverage is progressing, this is becoming an increasingly important barrier to access. The second theme is investing in safe and open digital data infrastructure. So here we're talking about data centers, and we know that this is not an easy endeavor from an investment perspective, given the climate impact of data centers. So there is a need to boost the data center availability in Africa in a climate-informed manner. We also need to develop the platform that are required, like digital ID, government to people payment, and strengthening the data protection and cybersecurity environment around these platforms. And the last theme is facilitating increased use and enhanced benefits of digital services. And I'm very pleased to see across the continent an increased awareness on how to use digital in agriculture, how to use digital in health. And for example, in Senegal, this has been a clear objective of the government, that we make a productive use of the internet. To close these opening remarks from our side, I would also like to emphasize, like Moses, that digital has no border. The objective is that digital becomes an opportunity to grow across frontiers. And this is why also working at regional level and at continental level on creating single digital markets is key. We need to have a connectivity across the border so that data flows can flow. We need to have good data storage and secure data storage capabilities so that African data can be stored and processed on the continent. And we also need online connectivity, online markets, so that entrepreneurs and businesses and government can develop digital services that are available across the borders. So we are very happy to be part of this conversation today, and I look forward also to a fruitful panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roger, for highlighting all the initiatives, ongoing initiatives by the World Bank to support the implementation of the digital transformation agenda in Africa, and also to help us to achieve our targets. And building a digital single market in Africa is one of the objectives, and also enabling all African citizens to have access to connectivity, digital networks and services is also one of the key objectives. And to achieve that, we need to close the digital infrastructure deficit. We need to harmonize policies and regulations, and also we need to develop the required digital skills. We have with us 6 distinguished panelists. They are representing different perspectives. We have from national level, we have a representative of the government of Senegal. From the regional level, we have regional economic communities. We have ECOWAS and East Africa community. From the continental level, we have Dr. Towela from AUDA-NEPAD, which is the implementing agency of the African Union, which will play a key role in the implementation phase. And also we have a representative of the private sector. We have Mr. Jimson. So we have prepared a number of questions to structure the discussions, and also we'll open the floor for to take questions from the audience. I just want to highlight that we have interpretation, English and French, so our speakers, they may feel free to speak either in French or in English. I would start from the national level, since we know that at national level there is also many things to be done in order to implement the digital transformation strategy, but also to develop the necessary services to enable our citizens to take advantage of this digital revolution. So my question to Mr. Coulibaly, I will ask in English, but feel free to respond in French if you wish. So from the national perspectives, what are the main building blocks to implement the digital transformation strategy? And if Senegal have adopted a national strategy, because some countries are taking the lead now in developing national digital transformation strategies or policies, or maybe just to move towards the implementation of the continental digital transformation strategy. Mr. Coulibaly, you have the floor.
Merci Ella, et bonjour à tous. Déjà, c'est avec un grand plaisir que je me retrouve ici parmi vous, effectivement, pour discuter donc de cette question de la transformation digitale donc de l'Afrique d'une manière générale, qui est une question de l'heure et une question extrêmement donc importante donc pour l'Afrique et pour le Sénégal plus particulièrement. Mais avant de démarrer mes propos, donc j'aimerais tout d'abord vous transmettre donc les messages donc de félicitations, de remerciements et d'encouragement donc de Monsieur le ministre Moussa Bocar Thiam, ministre de la Communication, des Télécommunications et de l'économie numérique donc du Sénégal, qui aurait bien voulu donc être là parmi nous, mais qui a été empêché donc par un conflit d'agenda. Alors, donc, pour cette première question, avant donc de répondre, je pense qu'il convient déjà de rappeler que le Sénégal dispose donc déjà d'une stratégie, une stratégie nationale donc de transformation digitale du pays, et qui est bien structurée et consignée dans un document appelé donc la SN 2025. SN 2025 comme stratégie Sénégal numérique donc 2025. Alors, c'est une stratégie qui est en parfaite adéquation aussi avec la stratégie de transformation digitale globalement de l'Afrique. C'est aussi une stratégie qui est arrimée avec donc notre référentiel donc de développement économique communément connu donc sous le nom donc du plan Sénégal émergent et qui est doté d'une vision. Cette vision, c'est quoi? Alors, c'est qu'en 2025, le numérique pour tous et pour tous les usages au Sénégal, avec un secteur privé dynamique et innovant dans un écosystème performant. Cela dit, la réalisation effectivement de cette vision devra effectivement reposer sur un certain nombre d'éléments clés de notre stratégie que nous pouvons regrouper, structurer donc, en deux piliers principaux. Donc, le premier pilier, c'est les prérequis. Donc, les prérequis à la mise en œuvre donc, de cette stratégie. Le second pilier, c'est donc les axes stratégiques qui vont justement reposer sur ces prérequis pour pouvoir être donc un succès. On va d'abord parler des prérequis. Dans la stratégie SN 2025, nous en avons identifié 3 globalement. Il s'agit donc du cadre juridique et institutionnel, du capital humain, mais aussi de la confiance numérique. Donc, en termes de cadre juridique, il faudrait comprendre donc la mise en place d'un cadre juridique et institutionnel qui est en phase avec donc les besoins actuels du secteur. Et l'objectif, c'est d'élaborer non seulement un cadre juridique complet, avec un environnement institutionnel cohérent et stable, mais aussi un cadre donc, de régulation qui sera performant et qui va adresser donc, les besoins actuels donc, du marché en termes d'ouverture et en termes donc, de transparence. Le capital humain, qui est aussi un élément extrêmement important. Il faudrait que l'on puisse jeter donc, les bases d'un développement du capital humain orienté numérique, qui nous permettra non seulement de répondre donc, à la demande donc, du marché donc, en termes donc, de ressources humaines, mais qui sera axé donc, sur un renforcement donc, des offres de formation sur l'éthique. Le dernier prérequis, c'est la sécurité. Donc, l'instauration d'un climat de confiance numérique. Et quand on parle de climat de confiance numérique, on fait forcément allusion donc aux nouveaux aspects liés à la sécurité numérique, c'est-à-dire en fait la cybersécurité. Et l'idée dans ce prérequis, c'est d'avoir une synergie forte de l'ensemble des initiatives qui visent donc à adresser justement ces aspects liés donc à la cybersécurité donc nationale. Donc voilà en gros d'une manière ramassée les 3 prérequis qui nous permettront plus tard, disons, de pouvoir activer les leviers que je m'en vais donc développer. Donc ces leviers sont principalement consultés par les axes stratégiques, les axes stratégiques qui sont définis dans la stratégie SN 2025. Il y en a 4 globalement. Donc le premier axe, c'est la promotion d'un accès ouvert et abordable aux réseaux et services numériques. Quand on parle donc d'un accès ouvert, on parle forcément du développement des infrastructures numériques dans sa globalité. Donc cela se passera forcément par donc, une forte implication dans la vulgarisation, la favorisation donc, du développement des infrastructures de télécommunications, généralement et numériques en particulier. Et pour cela, il est nécessaire d'associer et d'accompagner tous les efforts consentis d'une part par les acteurs du secteur privé, c'est-à-dire les opérateurs des télécoms, les opérateurs d'infrastructures et les FAI, mais aussi les acteurs du public, en l'occurrence, en tout cas au niveau national, des structures comme le FD-SUD, le Fonds de développement des services de télécommunications, ou bien la société CENUM, qui a pour mission, donc, disons, de procéder, donc, en tout cas, de piloter la stratégie de transformation digitale de l'administration sénégalaise. Justement, en parlant même de la transformation digitale de l'administration sénégalaise, cet aspect constitue le second levier. Et ce second levier a pour ambition d'avoir une administration connectée au service du citoyen et des entreprises et qui permettra non seulement de participer à l'optimisation des OPEX, donc en termes de services de télécommunications de l'État d'une manière générale, mais aussi de lancer en fait les bases d'une transformation digitale du secteur public avec une approche qu'on pourrait appeler une approche citizen-centrique. Le troisième axe stratégique, c'est la promotion d'une industrie du numérique, innovante et créatrice de valeur. C'est tout simplement la vulgarisation des soutiens au secteur privé numérique local. Donc, c'est un soutien qui peut être d'ordre financier, d'ordre institutionnel, mais aussi, si on peut l'appeler ainsi, du favoritisme, c'est-à-dire attribuer donc beaucoup plus de chances aux entreprises locales évoluant dans le secteur du TIC dans l'attribution en fait des marchés publics liés donc aux techniques de l'information et de la communication. Le quatrième et dernier axe stratégique, c'est la favorisation d'une diffusion du numérique au niveau en fait des secteurs clés de développement économique du Sénégal. Et l'idée de ce levier, c'est de faire en sorte que le numérique soit de plus en plus utilisé au niveau donc, de ces secteurs de développement comme la santé, l'éducation, la formation et le commerce d'une manière générale. Et il s'agira d'accompagner et d'encourager toutes les initiatives donc, qui vont dans le sens d'apporter une innovation dans disons, le déroulement de ces marchés au niveau donc, de ces points de développement économique et social, comme le e-commerce, le e-éducation et le e-santé, pour ne parler que de cela. Donc voilà en gros de manière ramassée ce qu'on peut dire donc, sur les axes, en tout cas les éléments clés de la stratégie SN 2025 que nous sommes en train de dérouler sur la base en fait, de budget programme et qui sont en parfaite adéquation effectivement avec la stratégie de transformation digitale de l'Afrique d'une manière générale. Merci beaucoup.
Pour avoir reflété un peu les aspects qui sont pris en compte dans la stratégie et la vision du Sénégal pour la transformation numérique. Et on se réjouit de voir qu'il y a la prise en compte dès le départ de la participation de tous les acteurs et la promotion du secteur privé. Donc on aura l'occasion de revenir là-dessus lors de la prochaine question. Cela me ramène à la question au niveau régional. Donc the question for the Excellency, the Commissioner from ECOWAS, is how this at regional level, what can we do, how can we put the necessary political leadership to advocate for the participation of all stakeholders in this digitalization process, and also to ensure that the implementation and domestication of the regional frameworks at national level. Excellency, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning. Donc, je vais peut-être essayer de faire un effort pour parler en anglais. Oui. Parce que oui, mais ça dépend encore, en fait des circonstances. Quoi. Oui. Donc, so thank you. ECOWAS has been dealing with the issue of harmonization of policy and regulatory frameworks within the digital economy sector for years now, particularly since 2007, that we have an initial, or we have adopted an initial supplementary act as annexes to the revised ECOWAS treaty. And this covered different thematic areas in the digital economy, and it established a series of procedures aimed at guaranteeing the harmonized application of the lawful framework in the whole of ECOWAS. It also aimed to attract more investment for faster and more harmonious development of the digital economy sector. Between then and now, other legal texts in the form of obviously supplementary acts, regulations, and directives which address specific areas in ICT have been adopted. Currently, for example, we are working with IMOA, the West African Economic and Monetary Union, to review all these legal texts, to adopt them and make them relevant in the current area, particularly to take into account some new paradigms. Aside ECOWAS and IMOA, there are other stakeholders and partners interested in the objective of the harmonization and the standardization. We have particularly the World Bank, the African Development Bank, the European Union, Smart Africa, just among others. One of the key enablers for the achievement of the objectives of ECOWAS in the medium term across all sectors, and for that matter, the digital economy sector included, is particularly what we call the equitable partnership, because collaboration is key to ensure that resources are pulled together for effective utilization toward the achievement of common goals. It's important that stakeholders come together to define common metrics and measure for the assessment of success of intervention and initiatives, as well as assignment of responsibilities to whichever actors or stakeholders best equipped to carry them out. Digital infrastructure and services need to be also secured. So it's why we have adopted many texts on cybersecurity and also cybersecurity within the region. So it's why you will see that actually our main critical priorities, or say it's just priorities, are first the cybersecurity issue, the cyber criminality issue, the e-applications, and also the effectiveness of roaming within the region, because through our own assessment, the roaming application or effectivity is around only 30% within the region. So, Chair, for now, it's just what I can say for the ECOWAS region. Perhaps I will come back for others. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Excellency, and for highlighting all the ongoing activities within ECOWAS region. As you mentioned, security of digital space is key, and also enabling roaming to ensure affordable access to all citizens also is very important. We have also with us another regional economic community. We have East Africa, Mr. Daniel Moranzi, who is the head of ICT. Maybe the first question is how you manage within East Africa community to bring, to ensure the implementation of the regional frameworks at national frameworks, and also to how to harmonize in order to attract investment in this strategic sector of ICT.
Yeah, thank you so much, and greetings from the East African community. First and foremost, I just wanted to let you know that the East African community now we are expanding daily. We use, as we started to also work on to the digital strategy, transformation strategy for Africa, and we participated. We are by then 6 countries, and as it was adopted, we later expanded it to become now 7. And as we are going for implementation, on the 7th one was DRC that was added on ESC. I mean, now joined the ESC. And as we speak today, our team has finished the verification mechanism to attract Somalia. So that shows how faster and how integrated East African community we are. So briefly, to touch on to what the moderator has just asked us, on the side of the East African community, when we worked onto this digital transformation, sorry, you will allow me, this mic is falling, so that's why I'm holding it a bit. So when we started working onto the digital transformation, different countries had the different levels of the way they are tackling the digital transformation. And the good examples are that different countries had already started working onto their national cybersecurity. And at the national cybersecurity policy and strategy, you would find that it works into isolation with what the regional is focusing on and what the continental level we are working on. So us being the subset, if I may say, East African Community for African Union, we have now managed to come together as the partner states, few countries which had already implemented their national cybersecurity policy, casing example like Kenya, Rwanda, Tanzania also in their final preparations. So we have come together to now see that the first core point is that when we have a regional tools on the cybersecurity, it helps us now to move together as a region into the integration. What have we also done together as the national and the regional level? East African community, we adopted our e-commerce strategy. And our e-commerce strategy, it was purely played together with all private sector and the public engagement. So in this context, what do we mean? Maybe before my presentation, my presentation will come in the next years, put it up. So I just wanted to also mention that the East African community, when we adopted the e-commerce strategy, it was a collaboration between, please I will do it later, the presentation. It will be in the second question, yeah. So what I just want to mention is that the e-commerce strategy, the prayers of the private sector was a major role, because for us we are so lucky to have the East African Business Council. East African Business Council represents the private sector federations, and the all players and the requirements for the national private sector was tabled and put on board. Another major part that we anchored onto the regional, the continental digital strategy was our immigration policy, which is now anchoring onto the digital ID that was already discussed. I think you are aware of that East African citizens, 4 countries can now move together using one ID. You can move across with an ID, but the remaining other countries, because they are finalizing with their production and also computerization of their ID, it's now the one that now they are coming on board. So we had to do the phased approach, but this is also the digital ID, which is also anchored on both the digital strategy for Africa and also the regional immigration policy. Also, we have moved further as the region and together with the national countries to have our East African payment system, the IPS. So on the IPS, colleagues, you know that the transaction within the region has, across Africa has always been a challenge, especially the bulk payments. So what we have done today, when I'm in Kenya and I'm doing a transfer maybe to Uganda or Rwanda, the time it takes to transfer money within Kenya, which is maximum 37 minutes, is the same time that it takes to transfer money within any country within the region. And this was a collaboration and of the stakeholders who are the banks, central bank, the regional collaboration, and purely this was the support from the Africa Development Bank, World Bank, and other players within this. So within that, those are also the major achievements the East African community have worked on, and anchoring onto the digital transformation for Africa, putting into the mind that what we are doing, we might later connect to the rest of the other 54 or 55 countries of Africa. So we did our Digital Reach, which is the digital health strategy, and it was approved by our heads of states, and this is also anchoring onto the existing continental strategy. This regional digital health initiative is the one that made us also during the COVID. If you saw, we are the first REC to issue the digital certificate. And as we speak, we now have like our ESC pass. ESC pass is like our vaccination and our COVID certificate. And it's based on that. So we have built it on a standard that is set by the African Union into the strategy and also validated by all stakeholders at the national level. So how does the East African community achieve this? You know, we have built the bottom-up approach whereby the technical committees, both private sector and the public sector sit together, come up with what's required, push it to our Council of Ministers, and now link it to the existing continental agenda. So I would humbly wish to say that we are on the track as the region and also as the countries within the ESC, because we have also established a monitoring tool. We have our IMS, it's called the East African Monitoring Tool, whereby we use this electronic tool to assess where we are together with the continental agenda, national agenda, and the regional agenda. So I briefly wanted to let you know that that is the level we are on. And you are aware that we have also worked onto the roaming, the regional roaming that is now into 4 countries. We are now expanding to the rest of the 3 remaining countries. I believe before the end of this quarter, by March, we should have got other 2 countries finalizing. The purpose is to ensure that the private sector during the business is fully facilitated. And also the integration within the region is also smooth within the communication. So this is the whole matrix that we work on together with the private sector. And we are moving forward for now the data roaming. Lastly, for what we are now working on, I mean we have already achieved, we have what we call the East African One Education Network. What does that mean? Students from one of the East African countries, you can move in another country and you pay the same school fees. You are no longer a foreigner. And what we have done now, we have also standardized our national curriculum together with our regional curriculum. Because we have the East African Inter-University Council, this one now works together with the higher education to harmonize our curriculum. So on the issues like our colleagues of ECOWAS have mentioned, we have also worked onto the curriculum for the cyber security to ensure that whatever we bring up should be anchored from the university level. So now what's happening through the East African community, because we have the free movement of our people, free movement of goods and services, also education, we found out that through educational sector, we should make sure that now what we want to achieve into integration is now done from the grassroots. So our moderator, allow me to stop here for the time being to give overview of what East African community is working on. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Daniel. I think we are happy to see that East Africa is really advanced in establishing its common digital market, and we look forward to share these best practices with other regions to enable them also to move, that we cannot achieve a continental digital single market if our regions, they don't progress at the same level or at the same rhythm, if you can say. Now I move to our representative of continental organization. We have Dr. Towela from AUDA NEPAD, which is the African Union Implementing Agency. What can we do to transpose or to transform the recommendations and objectives of digital transformation strategy to concrete projects and programs that we can support our countries in moving with their digital transformation agenda?
Thank you very much, Suhila, and good morning to the distinguished participants in the room, and then also to my fellow panelists. I think, first of all, maybe on behalf of AUD and NEPAD, just to thank the AUC and World Bank for organizing this session, I think on a very critical topic, and one that is always very relevant in terms of Africa's development aspirations. I would also perhaps, as I make my interventions, I think acknowledge very much what has been said by the various speakers before me, and particularly I think to applaud the efforts that are being done at the regional level. ECOWAS and EAC, I think, shared with us what they are doing, as well as the government of Senegal. And I think it also perhaps frames very well the approach that is needed if we are indeed going to use digital services and digital infrastructure to transform our economies, because clearly there has to be some level of ownership and appropriation of these different strategies that emanate from the continental level down to the regional and, of course, at the national where implementation actually takes place. So I think that that aspect of member states and citizens owning and understanding these different strategies and transposing them into local strategies, I think is very key and very critical. I think it's also important when we look at our context to, I think, underline and underscore issues around employment and job creation and the ways in which we will use digital services to uplift the lives of ordinary citizens. We've heard about the different aspects of the sectorial strategies that are trying to see how we will integrate digital services across our various sectors. And this is a conversation I think we've been having for quite some time. And perhaps at some point we will have to take stock and interrogate ourselves to say, how are we doing, and what is it that is stopping us perhaps from advancing further? At the same time, I think there's always the issues around the sustainability of our efforts. A lot of times, I think we see that infrastructure is built, equipment and technologies, which we, at the moment, a lot of it is perhaps imported from other regions. And then we find ourselves in a situation perhaps where we are not able to sustain some of the services that we implement. So I think there's a need to also, as we build these infrastructure and services, to really think about what is it that's going to keep these things going. What kinds of capacities do we need to have in our member states? What kinds of technologies do we need to acquire and start building and developing on the continent so that we're not overly dependent and overly reliant on our external partners? At the same time, I think the World Bank made a very strong case for the fact that we have to start thinking about the borderless nature of ICTs. Unfortunately, services indeed should be borderless, and I think that's the whole idea of the single digital market and the aspiration of regional integration. But that also then means that when we start talking about the e-services themselves, the issues around the security of our transactions, the issues around personal data protection and privacy also then become important in that borderless space, because one then has to look at the different jurisdictions and how do you make sure that you're securing these transactions across different jurisdictions and providing a safe, seamless, secure environment for transactions. The AUC, I think, has put a lot of effort into the African Union Convention on Cybersecurity and Personal Data Protection. I think we are probably in the last mile of getting that convention ratified. And I think it will change things for us in the sense that we will have this framework that unifies us insofar as being able to agree on how we want to secure the continent and secure our digital services. I want to speak a little bit about perhaps an approach that has worked and maybe one that we need to learn from. So AUD and EPAD has been supporting the African Union project with the Global Forum on Cyber Expertise that is looking at developing cyber capacity across the continent. And the two things that were done as part of this project, which I think are very important, is that first of all, in implementing the project, we wrote to all the member states and asked them to designate focal persons. And these focal persons had to be drawn from the public sector, the private sector, as well as from the academic or NGO sector. And the reason was that we wanted to make sure that we were able to have adequate representation in the countries, but also have people that could then go out and make sure that they were reaching out to their own constituencies in the countries, so that these issues of what the cyber capacity needs of the countries were across the different sectors could be accounted for, and could also then inform the types of products that were then developed in terms of the cyber expertise. The second thing that was done was to create a cyber capacity coordinating committee comprised of African institutions and entities that are active in the cyberspace, both from a capacity building perspective, from a technical perspective, but also from a regional implementation perspective. And the reasoning behind this was that we wanted to make sure that we would achieve a measure of coherence in terms of how we approach cyber activities across the continent. We're very well aware that there's a lot of different initiatives that are going on at different levels of the continent, but I think what sometimes perhaps happens is that all of these things are fragmented, and that fragmentation leads to a lack of effectiveness in terms of how we're able to actually multiply the benefits and the effects of these initiatives. So the thing, I think, for me, the message here is that a lot of coordination needs to happen, but a lot of coherence, and the coherence has to be amongst ourselves, but it also has to be coherence in our partnerships and in the way in which we interact with our partners, to make sure that we are maximizing the opportunities that we have to collaborate and to coordinate and to work on these different programs and projects in the ICT sector. So I think from my side, very important in terms of the coordination, in terms of coherence, in terms of the partnerships, but also in terms of the sustainability and the local ownership of our initiatives. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kawela. We take from your message that we need to sustain our efforts. We need to build capacity at all levels, and also we need to create the conditions to enable the cross-borders online transactions. And the last one was about coherence. We need to create coherence about our initiatives, about our decisions, and also policies and regulations. I think this takes me to the question to Mr. Mike Salao, is how can we create partnerships that will help us to close the huge digital infrastructure deficit. According to the estimation of the World Bank, we need around 100 billion in order to close the digital infrastructure gap in Africa. And while we value the support of the AFDB, we believe that we need to go beyond one development partners, but to sustain the partnerships. Thank you.
Thank you very much, the Program Director. And let me also here acknowledge the presence of the Commissioner for Infrastructure of ECOWAS, my dear friend, and also the Director of Infrastructure of African Union and Outer NEPAD, and dear colleagues here, many of you that I've seen in many occasions. Thank you also for inviting the bank to join this very important panel and topic. I think, hearing from the national representative here, starting from Senegal to the regional institution, the East African community, and then the rest, and also the continental, institution like Outer NEPAD, Tawila just mentioned, and the World Bank initial discussion. There's a lot that has been said about, enable environment, what we need to do to really foster private sector investment into digitalization, and also enable more public sector investment to unlock opportunity in this thing. I just want to share a couple of, statistics with you in terms of what we see as investment trends in ICT. The issue of gap has been mentioned. We also have, aggregate gaps in infrastructure to be somewhere close to 170 billion per year. In Africa, financing trend today on average for the last 5 years, we've seen it to be around 83 billion into Africa for the 4 sectors: transport, energy, ICT, and water. And of course, we had a peak of 100 billion just before the COVID, and the COVID has impacted negatively on the trend in financing infrastructure. From 100 billion, we've now somewhere between 84, 83 billion. So that's the context within which we are. At the same time, African population is growing, and demand for more ICT services growing across sectors. And we'll talk about those later. So I think that said, again, to come back to your question about what type of partnership, and I think it's very important to take a little step back to really question, whether we all agree on the goal to be achieved with the universal access digitalized service. I think this is very important. It doesn't mean the same thing to everybody, and I think we need to first clarify the goals and make sure that we align on the goal to be achieved, which is to be achieved by 2030 as a universal access. For some, it may mean, is it megabits per second that we need to be targeting? And then if yes, what's the target? Or is it that we bring in digital service to a rural area or specifically to some users that are last miles users that we are not reaching out to because of the cost of providing services? I think the goal is very important. The second issue is also the issue of bankability. I think from where we sit as a financier, development bankers, when we look at, when we have a goal that's forward-looking, investors typically will look at the financial return to do such investment. And I think that, we must looking at, how the forward-looking goals, investment that's required are actually generating financial return for private sector to embark on that investment. So that's where I believe that, the issue of incentive is very important, how the government can give incentive to private sector to de-risk, a private sector investment, to extend services beyond the lucrative market in urban areas and beyond certain sectors that we see. So that's, I believe there's a role for partnership to play there. Ourselves, the World Bank, and all the other financing institutions with the government to enable that environment, provide the de-risking instrument, the guarantee instrument, and to blend financing to actually allow private sector to have more visibility and actually address the issue of bankable projects. So government role here is actually very important with MDBs like ourselves. So already you've seen that kind of partnership being created already. So what strategy now do we need? Once we agree on the goal, we de-risk the project, we bring in the partnership with the government and private sector. I think for that I have 3 points to make. First is that, we must make sure that any strategy that we put in place must have a bankability and scalability objectives. So unless we are still thinking of bankable projects and scaling up, we will not be able to attract the financing that's required, so the gaps will keep increasing. And secondly, we will not be able to achieve the goal by 2030, which I think is the objective that we are seeking. So looking at the PIDA-PAP2 program, I think we have identified about 11 PIDA projects, ICT projects, estimated about 4.98 billion in the next 10 years. These only are backbone investment. These are infrastructure investment, not service-related investment. So I think from our perspective, the African Union and other NEPA, with ourselves and the other, this 11 project will be our priority goal for us to do because it has interconnectivity element. And unless you start interconnecting countries, you'll not be able to actually achieve this goal. So PIDA project, priority 11 project, I think is a way to go for us. And that will actually help to achieve the issue of scalability. That's where we scale up because we are doing bigger transformational infrastructure. And the second element, I think, for us is also the role that the government once more has to play to induce demand for broadband and universal access, meaning government have objective to digitalize education system, right? So we must be very intentional about that to tell us what are the goals that the government want to achieve in digitalized education or bringing education to be smart education and at which horizon. That gives demand for private sector to think about. Second, you think of healthcare education, agricultural education, smart agriculture. Last week, there was a huge event here that the bank organized with the government of Senegal, a very successful event on agriculture, where you hear a lot about smart agriculture. So we can leverage technology. So that is actually need to be led by the government. And of course, other sectors that we know about education, healthcare, and then e-trade and so on. So the government-led demand is very important in addition to a private sector-led demand or users. And then we have a KPIs on that. The other thing that I also want to say is that for strategy to work and to achieve, you need to leverage existing mechanism. We are all aware of the Universal Service Fund in Africa for digitalization. That fund, although it's set up, has not been innovative enough to leverage funding. And I think collectively, again, that's why we bring partnership together to see how do we put our minds together to use that fund to leverage innovative financing. And I believe one of the proposal on the table is to have this fund to be element to de-risk investment. That means providing some guarantee or partial or full guarantee that can de-risk a private sector investment. And for that, we are thinking that if we support the proposal that all the private sector operators in mobile and digital put about 2% of their income into this fund to recapitalize this fund, then you start using this fund innovatively to catalyze further private sector investment, and it serves as first loss guarantee or partial guarantee. So that's kind of innovative thinking to really bring about this kind of instrument to leverage funding, and I think it's very important for us to achieve this thing. And then, of course, one, we need to agree on shared objective to make this operational. Second, we need to recognize that public sector must lead the way, must be very active, and private sector cannot carry this universal service objective alone. Third, we need to have this operational strategy that is bankable and scalable. Fourth, we need to be very intentional about what we want to do and have the right KPIs. And then fourth, we need to bring innovation to the tools that we have at our disposal. And this cannot be done by one institution. So that's why your question is very pertinent, that we here collectively have to build that partnership, that coalition. The bank, I will not finish by not mentioning what the bank has done concretely. And I think, our vision, focus is really to deliver the strong infrastructure backbone, the missing links that are there. So we have financed Central African fiber backbones. We are now looking at trans-Saharan fiber, backbones, and we'll be doing also for some countries, but with regional impact. So if we at the development bank focus on the, heavy burden of infrastructure deficit to bridge the gap, and I think private sector will come in to do the rest. So I think that's what I want to say here, and to also learn that we have a very innovative initiative we are supporting with COMESA. It's called African Cloud Ecosystem, ACE, which is really an initiative led by COMESA member countries to really have, data centers hosted on the African continent, thereby lowering the cost and also spending scope to reach public sector and other demands for e-commerce and so on and so on. So I think these are some of the things that I think this partnership can do. We must be very intentional to really harness the partnership with private sector. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sarau. I think it is important you highlighted that FDB is currently supporting the development of regional backbone, and also within the program for infrastructure development, there is support from the FDB to development of intra-Africa connectivity, like with regional and cross-regional projects. And also we thank you for highlighting all the preconditions or maybe the strategy that we need to adopt in order to build this partnership that will enable us to take advantage of this digitalization to modernize key sectors of our economy. I think and the main point was the need to foster the participation of the private sector and to enhance the cooperation between the public and private sector in developing this digital space. This takes me to the last speaker, and it is from the private sector. We have Mr. Jimson. Maybe the question is, how can we bring the private sector in Africa to be part of this digital transformation? Mr. Gibson, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Greetings, everyone. Really recognize members of the panel. My name is Jimson Olufuye, the chair of the Advisory Council of Africa ICT Alliance. In my private life, I run an IT consulting firm. We build data centers and help companies and organizations mitigate cybersecurity issues. Well, it's a real pleasure to be here. And speaking lastly, I think everyone, they've spoken all I think I have to say, so maybe I will just say thank you very much. But because we have the camera rolling, permit me to just skip over some of the things I noted. I must really appreciate the effort of African Development Bank and the World Bank. They've done tremendous things. African Union, too, has done tremendous work. Can we put our hands together for this organization? And the government of Senegal. Yes, Nigerian government, too, they are very, very sensitive. They listen to us in the private sector. So that brings me to the point number one, that is the need to collaborate and strengthen the private sector organization, and in particular advocacy group. As I said, I represent Africa ICT Alliance. It was set up in 2012 by my humble self with some other colleagues across Africa, that we need to have African voices concerning issues like these. And we started with 6 countries, 2012. And today we are about 40. So we have representatives even in Senegal here. So it's made up of companies, IT companies, multi-stakeholder companies, multinationals, and professionals. Our vision is to fulfill the promise of the digital age for everyone in Africa, that is information society, in line with the WSIS 2003 and 2005 outcomes, and of course, the Sustainable Development Goal, then the African Transformation Strategy, and Africa We Want 2063. So we are partners in progress. The missing link I've seen is the need for advocacy. We need to support advocacy group. That's what we recognize in Nigeria. And our efforts is 1990s, because I used to be the president of the IT Association of Nigeria before I scaled up to the continental advocacy. And we pushed a lot, and the government listened. Now you see a lot of activities in Nigeria. ICT is contributing about 18% to our GDP. In fact, digital economy is about 40% of our system. In fact, even now you see there is a lot of mopping of excess cash in the system, so more of e-transactions. So it's part of what we have been pushing for. So there's need for collaboration of the government with the private sector, more collaboration, encouraging advocacy group within the countries. And we're happy AU has been working with us, UNECA also has been working with us to move forward. Let me also mention ETESA in Egypt. Egyptian government, they work closely with their advocacy organization. So you see a lot of things going on in Egypt as well, and Nigeria. So my colleague here, Salah, mentioned something about the need for government. Even the moderator also talked about it, government needs to move. Really, we noted this long ago, that if government does not move, nothing moves. So I have the privilege of being at the United Nations Working Group, and I've said that we work together. We are not, in adherence with the government. We are partnering in progress because we have creativity. We bring skill sets. We work with World Bank. The World Bank has solid standard, and African Development Bank, they have framework. So we work with them, and we create more jobs. So we are partners in progress. And based on this, the Nigerian government, for example, when we're talking about creating enabling environment, we have mentioned enabling environment through regulation, okay, through laws. In 2019, the Nigerian government set up the data protection, regulation, just in line with the European data protection regulation. And that regulation, since 2019, has created more than 5,000 jobs. 5,000 jobs we created, and it's creating more. In fact, the industry now is worth about $20 million, so it's still growing. Last year, based on advocacy, the government listened, and to what we're saying, that there is need for startup framework, a kind of law to help startups. And now, by last year, after all stakeholders put us together, there is a startup law in place with the startup council, with all representatives of all stakeholders in it, to talk about, funding, there's startup funding. Okay, those that have research outcome that want to put into the market, they get funds, and then they discuss framework to provide best practices for them.
Recording in progress.
So there's a database of angel investors. If you're interested in investing, you could put into it, and then you can note what you want to support. They are collaborating with the Nigerian University Commission so that the research output can also fit into the industry. So we're all there. The private sector is also there. So through regulation, they can create incentive, as was mentioned, to enable entry into government contracts. Okay, you categorize it so that low level can be part of it, higher level, there are big businesses that just big entrepreneur can take part in it. This is what regulation can do. Government, too, based on advocacy, is being talking about digitalization. Everything should be digitalized. In fact, from the presidency, directed that everything should be digitalized. And civil servants, they're slow, they die, but they're trying, but they're moving, they're pushing. And the advocacy to pushing. And so everything about governance is being digitalized. I'm involved, I see it. And thanks to intervention of World Bank and so for data centers, for integration services and so on and so forth. Then, as mentioned, talking about this digital infrastructure, there are a number of technologies that can easily also be used. Of course, 5G, 4G, TV white spaces, satellites. We just licensed the Starlink to use their services. And as Salah mentioned, the Universal Service Provision Fund, they've been using it very well. At least they try in Nigeria, because schools, they put in PCs, and when they buy PC, they patronize the entrepreneurs. And then when the e-learning solution, they patronize us, because we have a syllabus. So we have a lot of activities going on locally. Local content is the emphasis. There is provision from the government that the first line of consideration is local company, local content. Okay? If it does not exist, then you can look elsewhere. So cross-border activity, how can we promote it? We need to promote it. As you mentioned, I am so glad to hear about the project you are doing to ensure that we can connect. East Africa is doing great work. I hope ECOWAS too, they have it in plan. We are looking forward to that, so that even though these roaming hindrances can be removed and we can have one network, we look forward to it seriously, okay, to help us. And then the World Bank, I think we've intervened in some economies with regard to capability. We need to build capability of companies like a CMM. They can be subsidized, so that all those companies that participate in the scheme, when they deliver project, it to be a sustainable project. It to be a project that meets standard and it does not fail. So we need to ensure that the innovative products, they easily come to the marketplace. You're talking about platform. So innovative products, we need to encourage it. Then lastly, if there is no stable government, there will be no real investment. So it's very important there is stability in the governance, in our systems. And this is where I also commend the EU effort to ensure that there is ease of transition from one administration to the other. Because if there is instability, investment fund will dry off. It will just dry off. So we need to encourage the EU to continue to push in this regard, and all the regional economies, so that the African digital transformation we are looking forward to does not decelerate. Thank you very much for now.
Thank you. Thank you, representative of the private sector. We do take note that we need to work more on advocacy and to support collaboration between the private sector, and also to bring them on board, that they can be aware about the huge opportunities arising from the digital transformation. Now we move to the second round of the questions. Maybe I would start by Dr. Tawila. I think Mr. Salah, he mentioned the 11 ICT project within the PDA-PAP2 project. The question is, how can we make sure that these 11 projects are implemented before 2030, or maybe before? Because we know that although this 11 projects, they represent only 16% of the 69, which will take us to another question on how to use this PIDA as continental framework to develop more digital infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Suhila. So I think that that's a very good question, and I think very pertinent considering where we are. I think this is specifically why we have this second Dakar Infrastructure Financing Summit, because the intention is that we need together to discuss the various projects that are at hand, but to also then find the solutions that will allow us to make these projects bankable, as Mike has said from the FDB, and really see how we will move them forward. I think some of the things that we see in terms of the PIDA projects and the PIDA ICT projects, obviously there are a lot of similarities in terms of the actual projects in the portfolio. So you have the backbone or interconnectivity projects, the missing links projects. But very interestingly, I think in this particular portfolio of PIDA PAP 2, we have quite a number of data center projects. And this is pointing obviously to the evolution of the ICT sector and some of the needs in the sector. I think what would perhaps be good for the participants in this meeting is to note the fact that on Friday we will have very specific sessions, boardroom sessions focusing on these projects. We have 4 projects that are going to be presented during this particular summit. There is the Amical Cabral fiber optic submarine system. There is the Juba, I think it's Juba-Nairobi link. And then we have 2 data center projects, one from ECAS and one from IGAD as well. And really what we would like to be able to do is to use this opportunity to present the projects, and this will be done by the project owners themselves, presenting the projects to potential investors and other stakeholders, unpacking perhaps what the needs and the deficiencies are in terms of those projects, but together then starting to co-create and co-construct a process that will lead those projects to bankability. From our side, what we have seen in terms of the PIDA portfolio, of those 69 projects, more than 60% of those projects are still very much in the early stages, meaning that there is a lot of work that needs to be done to get the projects to the point where they can actually attract funding for feasibility and project preparation, and then move on to bankability. I think the other thing, perhaps in that regard also then, is to really consider maybe different ways in which we will approach this idea of getting the projects to bankability. We note that in some instances, and Mike perhaps from the bank will agree or disagree, that money is not really the problem. I think that there's a lot of money out there, but the challenge we are facing is that we are not able to attract that money and to capture that money and put that money towards the projects. And we really need to do a bit of serious reflection and interrogation as to what is it that we need to do differently that's going to enable us to actually be able to attract that funding and those investments. Much is said about risk and de-risking, and then there's different points of views around that, and maybe we need to also have conversations around really what are the issues around project risk, political risk, and other kinds of risks that perhaps may obtain on the continent. But I think one thing that we all perhaps have to agree is the fact that as member states and as citizens of the continent, we have agreed that these are the priorities. I think that is not in question. And the issue then for us is, having agreed that these are priorities, how are we going to make sure that we are walking that talk that says that these are our priority projects, and this is how we're going to put the relevant mechanisms in place to make sure that those projects are able to attract financing and move to bankability. Talking about some of the challenges around perhaps why projects perhaps are taking so long to be implemented, and I'm really referring to the fact that we are on a 10-year horizon. So we have 69 projects which within the next 10 years we have to move as many of those projects as possible to bankability. Some of the things that perhaps hinder us, are things that have to do with perhaps the nature of the project, the fact that these are cross-border projects, very complex maybe in nature, but also involving different stakeholders and different parties. And sometimes to get the agreements around how those projects will be implemented, getting intergovernmental agreements takes us longer than it should. In some instances, the idea of the feasibility studies around those projects, we find ourselves in a repetitive cycle of having to redo feasibility studies because we will do the study and then time will elapse before the project is able to move beyond that feasibility study, and then when we come back we have to restart the feasibility study, and we are constantly stuck in this loop of feasibility studies. So I think the challenge for us is really to really think through how we're going to get out of that cycle. I think the AFDB has done a very good job of laying out the financing strategy for PIDA implementation, and I think it's really then is for us to now sit and look at that financing strategy, look at all these different projects, and really have a very clear roadmap for each project as to how we're going to move it forward. For us as AUD and NEPA, this is what the Dakar Financing Summit is about. It's about beginning that conversation around how we're going to tackle infrastructure financing on the continent, how we're going to put in place the relevant mechanisms beyond just the financial to really help us to move these projects forward, so that in 2030, when we are having another conversation around the PIDA projects and the next iteration of PIDA, we should have a good story to tell about what we have been able to do with the 69 projects and the 11 ICT projects in particular. Thank you.
Thank you, Tuwila. We are happy to see that there is progress, that there is a lot of work being done both by AUDANEPAD and AFDB to put in place the mechanism that will support regional economic communities in taking projects to bankability. And I think this may take me to the next question. Maybe I wonder if we can put in place the same mechanism to support member states at national level. And my question is to Mr. Salau, because we know that countries also, they don't, sometimes they face challenge in identifying their needs in terms of investment, and also how to make projects bankable in order to attract the investment. Maybe can we think about similar initiative, but to put at the disposal of countries?
Thank you very much, Madam Program Director. I think this is a very important question, because we need to have an ecosystem approach so that every different layers, will have their role to play. While we are here, because we are taking a continental view, a regional view, focus on a regional institutional mechanism, like Tuwila just mentioned, we also do not forget the countries, because at the end of the day, project implementation takes place in countries. They are the ones that will take the loan to finance the project, if it's public sector project, and it's really in countries driven by government national development plan and escalate at the regional integration plan and continental union plan. So I think from our perspective in African Development Bank, that is the approach that we have. It's an ecosystem approach. So we do support countries. We have mechanisms in place to support countries at that level, even at the local government level, to have a planning in place, starting by looking at the master planning at country level, investment plans would give us the priority in the countries upon which we now derive our investment strategy, a development strategy, called a country strategy. And then we now align all the mechanisms for project preparation to support countries. We have now taken a view that, in addition to what we do, like, various funds that we have at the African Development Bank to prepare projects, we have Africa Water Facility for water, we have SEFA for energy, we have Mixed Trust Fund for middle-income countries, North Africa and Southern Africa, and Nigeria, and then so on, those middle-income countries in Africa. And then we have also, IPPF, of course, which is for regional countries. So we have that. But I think what's important for us to do now is to have a system or mechanism by which we promote country-led system to develop project to bankability. You can have a vehicle, infrastructure development vehicle in place where you leverage government fiscal budget resources and donor resources together. And I'm sure the World Bank will think about the same thing, that, so that you create a system in a place to be more sustainable. And we, as the MDBs, will come in to support. So government must take ownership to put a bit of their investment plan budget, could be 5% or 3%, and they leverage donors like ourselves and others and private sector to have a kind of a revolving funds, to start doing things at scale. And I think if you do that in the country, then you start seeing sustainability and to drive things. And I think that's what private sector is also looking for, to have a visibility on government plans and investment plan, bankable project. So that's what we do. And I'm glad that my colleague from Nigeria just mentioned the bank has been supporting Cape Verde and Senegal on the digital technology parks here, and then Nigeria Innovation and Digital Economy and Creative Industry Program, as well as Rwanda Innovation Program. So I think we are already seeing that emergence of local entrepreneurs and private sector coming up in a digital innovation sector. But again, we talk about government should lead, but I think it's also very important, now that I have the floor, just to mention one element which I think is very important, is the role that the regional economic communities are playing or should play more, which is to balance between the public policy perspective and market creation. That's very important. They make the regulation at the cross-border level to promote a bigger market for digital. At the same time, that regulation must have in mind also how do we create, a market. I think that balancing act is very important, and that's where we, as the development banking, serving as advisors to the countries, the regional institution, can advise and also see how that balance can be maintained to create a bigger market for private sector and to roll out our universal access objective. So let me stop here in the interest of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we agree with you that we need to create sustainable and also to build the capacity of countries in order to enable them to create these markets, these digital markets that will enable African entrepreneurs to emerge and also attract international investment. I think this takes me to the question to Mr. Coulibaly from Senegal, because we talk about attracting investment. We know also that there are many things that have been done at regional level through the regional economic communities and continental level. But also there is many things that are taking place at national level. I would like to know how, like countries, they mobilize the resources. Is there need to coordinate between countries, or it is because many countries they go to mobilize the resources to develop their digital systems and also infrastructure, but they do it at bilateral level. Do we need to coordinate this resource mobilization at continental level?
Oui. Merci beaucoup, Madame la modératrice. Donc, effectivement, c'est une question qui est extrêmement pertinente, dans la mesure où, comme l'a dit tout à l'heure ma collègue co-panéliste, l'argent est là, donc le problème d'argent ne se pose pas. Il suffit juste donc de trouver les moyens de pouvoir mobiliser donc cet argent-là. Mais je pense qu'il y a d'abord une première chose, donc un constat général donc, sur lequel il faudrait que l'on s'accorde. C'est-à-dire qu'aujourd'hui, il faut quand même que l'on soit d'accord que l'aspect infrastructure numérique qui constitue plus ou moins la base donc de la transformation digitale n'est pas aussi bien prise en compte dans les visions d'intégration régionale. Aujourd'hui, cette vision disons, adresse plus les urgences du moment, qui sont donc, les infrastructures liées à l'énergie et au transport. Donc, il y a un réel besoin, un besoin pressant, donc, que ces infrastructures numériques prennent autant de place que celle de l'électricité et du transport donc, dans cette vision d'intégration régionale ou bien même continentale. Cela veut dire quoi? Cela veut dire qu'il nous faut, à l'échelle régionale ou continentale, donc plus d'implication, certes, des choses sont déjà faites, hein, c'est bien, mais il nous faut plus d'implication de nos dirigeants, hein, donc dans la prise donc, de conscience effectivement de l'intérêt de cette question du numérique. Dans certains pays, comme le Sénégal, et cela justement s'explique par ce que disaient tout à l'heure nos frères donc, de l'Afrique de l'Est. Et on voit donc le fait que certains pays africains sont plus avancés dans ce domaine-là que d'autres. Alors, au Sénégal et dans certains pays, nous avons quand même la chance d'avoir ici un chef d'État qui a très tôt compris l'urgence et l'intérêt de cette question du numérique, au point d'en faire un prérequis majeur dans la réussite du plan Sénégal émergent, notamment dans les aspects liés à l'amélioration de l'environnement des affaires. Alors, mais cela n'est pas forcément le cas dans d'autres pays frères. Ça, c'est le premier élément. Le second élément consiste donc à dresser aussi une bonne cartographie des acteurs principaux de ce secteur, donc aussi bien le secteur privé que le secteur public, qui évoluent donc dans ce secteur à l'échelle régionale et continentale. Et sur cette cartographie, faire figurer au premier plan les entreprises et les organisations qui développent ces infrastructures de télécommunications, ces infrastructures numériques, et qui commercialisent aussi, qui offrent donc ces services numériques. L'idée derrière, c'est d'avoir des engagements forts de ces acteurs, apporter donc des investissements qui peuvent parfois être mutualisés à l'échelle régionale dans ce secteur, mais tout en prêtant une attention particulière aux intérêts des uns et des autres. Et c'est à partir de ce moment qu'on pourra lancer des réflexions avec toutes les parties prenantes, afin d'harmoniser les différentes stratégies de transformation numérique, notamment sur le plan des aspects liés à la réglementation et sur le plan juridique, à l'échelle nationale et pourquoi pas continentale, et ce qui va permettre justement de rassurer ces investisseurs, mais aussi les bailleurs de fonds comme la Banque mondiale ou bien la BAD. La prochaine étape, pour moi, consistera à mettre en place des organes régionaux de gouvernance de la transformation digitale. Et ces organes seront chargés de 3 missions principales. D'abord, d'élaborer et de maturer les propositions de projets numériques soumises par les États, de s'assurer que ces projets proposés sont en phase avec la stratégie de transformation digitale de l'Afrique dans sa globalité, et en dernier lieu, d'évaluer l'impact sur le développement économique et social de ces projets, afin justement d'avoir une idée claire sur les dividendes économiques. Et ce sont justement ces dividendes économiques qui, aujourd'hui, nous permettront de susciter l'intérêt, disons, des partenaires au développement, comme la Banque mondiale, que je remercie au passage pour cet exercice, et donc de pouvoir nous accompagner dans l'utilisation des capitaux qu'ils mettront à notre disposition. Alors, pour moi, l'apport combiné de toutes ces étapes énumérées plus haut contribueront, à mon sens, à installer un cadre propice à des montages de partenariats de type PPP, avec un accompagnement des partenaires au développement, et comme c'est actuellement le cas avec le Sénégal, dans le cadre du projet PAENS, le programme d'appui, programme d'accélération de l'économie numérique du Sénégal, que nous remercions, que nous faisons actuellement avec la Banque mondiale, et que nous remercions aussi au passage pour cet accompagnement. Donc voilà, en gros, moi en tout cas, les visions, disons, les solutions que je vois à court terme, qui nous permettront un peu d'installer ou de mettre en place le cadre de gouvernance nous permettant de mobiliser les capitaux afin de pouvoir financer ces objectifs donc, de transformation digitaux que nous avons dans nos différents pays. Voilà. Merci beaucoup.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur Koulibaly. Avant de poser la question à Son Excellence le commissaire de ECOWAS, je voudrais remercier Monsieur Mike Salaou pour sa participation, parce qu'il souhaiterait se retirer, parce qu'il a un autre panel qui va se tenir maintenant. Donc je vous demande de me joindre pour remercier Monsieur Mike pour sa participation. Merci. I think this takes me to the question to the ECOWAS. Excellency, I would like to know how ECOWAS is handling the cross-cutting nature of digital, how you manage to, digitalization is cross-cutting, so we need to work on different sectors at the same time. So I would like to know what are the plans at ECOWAS level. Je vais poser en français? Oui, en français. OK. Donc, ma question, c'était sur la transversalité de la numérisation. Donc, elle touche tous les secteurs. Donc, autant que professionnel dans le secteur, on doit développer ce secteur, mais en même temps aider les autres secteurs à numériser. Donc, je souhaiterais savoir quels sont les plans de votre région quant à cette complexité.
OK, merci, madame. Oui, en fait, comme vous dites, le secteur des télécommunications est un secteur transversal, donc qui est disséminé dans les autres secteurs. Et donc, c'est ça qui fait que aujourd'hui, justement, quand vous prenez, par exemple, le secteur de l'énergie, quand vous faites des lignes d'interconnexion, on profite chaque fois, en fait, en construisant ces lignes, de mettre des câbles à fibre optique à travers ces lignes-là. Parce que déjà, même de manière constructive, les lignes en haute tension ont toujours un câble porteur de télécommunication qui sert en fait de télécommunication. Donc, on essaie de ne pas occulter cet aspect quand chaque fois on construit des lignes de haute tension. Donc, vous allez voir que quasiment toutes les lignes de haute tension tiennent compte de cet aspect. Et l'autre aspect, justement, aujourd'hui, dans le domaine de l'énergie, justement, c'est parce que même dans les écoles d'ingénieurs, vous voyez, quand on dit electrical engineering, en fait, même les télécommunications, l'électronique, l'informatique et l'électricité, les gens ont un tronc commun, c'est vers les deux, ou la dernière année, ou la formation. C'est ça qui fait que même quand vous êtes ingénieur électricien, vous comprenez les télécommunications, surtout. Donc, parce que dans l'énergie, quand vous voyez tous les dispatching, fondamentalement, utilisent beaucoup de télécommunications pour fonctionner. Quand vous prenez l'aviation civile, toutes les tours de contrôle, les communications avec entre les avions et le sol, et les différentes tours de contrôle, les télécommunications sont prépondérantes. Donc aujourd'hui, vous ne pouvez pas faire une infrastructure aéronautique ou d'aide à la navigation aérienne sans tenir compte des télécommunications. Donc c'est ce qui fait que justement, dans tous les textes que je venais de dire qu'on avait adoptés, nous tenons compte de ce facteur. Et je profite en fait de l'occasion pour dire que par rapport au PIDA, je reviens un peu hors de la question, et justement d'une manière générale, c'est la mobilisation des ressources en fait qui est difficile, ainsi que même la mise en œuvre de ces projets régionaux, puisque très souvent on va vous dire au niveau des barres de fonds, l'argent est là, mais l'Afrique souffre beaucoup de la disponibilité des projets bancables. Donc, qui veut dire qu'il faut d'abord avoir de l'argent au préalable pour mener les activités préparatoires. Et qui dit activités préparatoires, les études de pré-faisabilité ou de faisabilité d'un point de vue technique, financier, économique, environnemental et social. Donc, il faut montrer tout ce à travers ce package d'études que le projet est rentable. Une fois que sa rentabilité devient une évidence, maintenant, naturellement, ça peut attirer des investisseurs. Et la particularité des télécommunications par rapport, par exemple, au transport ou à l'énergie, qui sont plus du domaine public. Aujourd'hui, on a tendance, même au niveau des États, peut-être le représentant du Sénégal va le confirmer, on a tendance à laisser les télécommunications dans le domaine plus privé. Et c'est ce qui fait que quand on ne fait pas attention dans nos pays, c'est les privés même qui vont peut-être plus, je ne dirais pas réguler, ou qui vont commander même les télécommunications, ce qui n'est pas le cas dans les autres secteurs comme le transport, l'eau et l'énergie. Donc il faut qu'on tienne compte de cette particularité. Et aujourd'hui, quand vous regardez à travers les différentes agences de régulation de ces secteurs, les agences qui ont beaucoup plus d'argent, ce sont les agences de télécommunications, parce que il a des gros chiffres d'affaires que les opérateurs font, il a un pourcentage qu'ils payent, et c'est ce qui fait que quand même on peut générer dans ces fonds, ne serait-ce que financer les activités préparatoires pour rendre les projets de télécom viables. Merci.
Thank you, Excellency. I think we agree about our key role is to raise awareness on the importance of integrating digital in all sectors, and also, as you mentioned, when it comes to the physical infrastructure project, I think we have discussed it is about putting resources and also building capacity in order to take projects to bankability. I think I highlighted earlier that East Africa is one of the regions that is most advanced in establishing its digital market. I kindly invite Mr. Daniel to give us an overview on the progress, and we will conclude with the private sector. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, moderator. I think I just wanted to request the people to put for me the projections. Yeah, as they are setting up the projection of what I wanted to show you as the ESC, briefly I just wanted to let you know that on the SDM, the single digital market, we first had to do the study that we were supported by the World Bank. And this study happened some time back and identified the key items that of which East African community we can focus on as we do our SDM. So from the presentation the African Union made and also from the ESC regional digital agenda, I just wanted to first of all show you that our single digital market is anchored onto our regional digital agenda that is already looking at the financial services, agriculture services, climate change, trade, education, and health services, as I had earlier alluded to. And this digital agenda for the ESC was approved for our 13th Ordinary Council of the Ministers and the 8th Summit of the Heads of States. So it's something, please? Yes. Something that I just wanted now, for the purpose of the time, is that our single digital market for the ESC as a vision and now the agenda today is that through the support we got from the World Bank as we developed as we did assessment, we found out that there are 4 major enabling environments we need to focus on. There is online connectivity market, data market, connectivity enabling environment. And as you do see in the middle, we are now 7 countries, the current 7 countries that are now to implement our single digital market. So briefly, if you do see the framework of our single digital market, we are focusing on those are the key priority areas we need to focus in order to remove the cross-border barriers that we have. For the single online market, you cannot have an online market while your digital ID is still having a challenge for authentication purposes. For the digital payment, if the digital payment is a challenge, you can't now do as a single digital market. And for the consumer protection and also the logistics part. So what have we done in these pillars through also, as I earlier mentioned, for the digital ID, we are now looking at the way our digital ID contributes to the online market, whereby in our national level, where the registration of the buyer, of the sellers is happening, we need to ensure that there is now that authentication of the buyer and the seller at the regional level, at the national level, which escalates to the regional level. And on the digital payments, so now we have come up with the regional harmonization in order to make sure that our regional payments is not an overhead cost to the people. Earlier before, we have been facing challenges within our region. For instance, we have KCB within all 7 countries now, and Equity, one of the banks we do have. You find you use your ATM from maybe KCB to one of the bank in Tanzania, they charge you like 3,000. You go to another ATM, they charge you like 7,000. You go to another one like 10,000. So all that has not been harmonized was due to the lack of the national switches and the regional switch, the way they communicate. Now we are happy that our all 6 countries, sorry for DRC, I do not talk much because we are now enrolling them and make sure that things move faster. For the 6 countries, we are sure that we have a national switch. And the now digital payment is no longer challenged. So the project that we are now working with the World Bank as a support is already finding some of the enabling environments. So on the single data market, one of the major challenges we had, and that's why it's one of the major priority now, as you would see, was on the data privacy and data protection laws, whereby the different partner states had come up with the national laws that limits that issue of the data, cross-border data flow. And we want to ensure that we remove the barriers for the cross-border data flow and the sharing of our cybersecurity resources, if I may say. And what are we looking at now for the regional data and even the cybersecurity? We are coming up through the projects that we are now implementing, which is going to be for the 5 years, to establish a regional SAT, a regional virtual SAT, whereby the regional national SATs are able to communicate. Because the more you are going for the digital trade, the more you are going, there are also several cyber crimes across. So in this context, we are now establishing the regional SAT for the purpose of communication and also for our data privacy. The national laws have been that the data is hosted and is a sovereign of that country. But to the regional guidelines that you are now establishing is to ensure that now data can roam within our region. Because you will find that one company is registered within East Africa and you have to trade within 7 countries. So the moment you restrict where the data is going to be hosted, it's a challenge. So this is something that we are working on with the national policy makers and the regulators to now finalize the regional harmonization of the cybersecurity. So on the infrastructure, wholesale of our data and also the retail side, these are the key enablers that we know that we cannot achieve the digital connectivity or the digital market we intend to do without those as the key pillars. On our last pillar, we focused on to the enabling environments, which are the digital skills. You know, you go in this while you are forgetting that we have a big gap of our SMEs. These are informal sectors that people have not. So what have we done. We have now collaborated with the ICT chambers within the private sectors federation within East Africa. And also we have also established a center of excellence, which now trains onto the mobile application. So we have the regional center of excellence that is, of course, starting to offer the master's program, but also we have categorically dealt and focused onto the informal sector by bringing the digital skills to them. Also the innovation, we are bringing together our K-labs, I-labs, and the innovation for our region. The first innovation week happened before Christmas in Kampala for the ESC, and this is now bringing up all young innovators, subjecting them to our markets so that they can work towards this digital single market. And we are looking at the infrastructure, especially the energy, and that's why maybe such a setups, we thank the World Bank, AUDA, NEPAD, and the Africa Development Bank, trying to bring this together. So at the national level, it's still the same work that's being done as enabling environments. So the architecture you are seeing on the screen, this is our regional switch or the hassle-free integration for the payments. What does that mean? We have already achieved our national switches. They are already communicating to all the national banks. So the regional part that we are working on is now establishing the regional switch, whereby the MNOs are able to collaborate with also the commercial banks on the other side, and also the cross-border data roaming. For your information, we are working on this project that is supported by World Bank, the data roaming for the region now. The voice roaming we have achieved, and we know that we cannot wait for other two countries to join, so we have moved faster to also bring on board the data roaming, because we know data is another enabler for the digital trade. And when we are now, and it's good that what we realize, the other countries now that had not yet gone for the honor are also moving it together with the data roaming and voice. And this is now the big achievements of the hassle-free for the payment. And as I earlier said, it's all alluding to the focus of the continental. So this is also, we are looking at the continental payment, the PAPs, it's wherever we are developing this, we are not forgetting that the East African community is within African continent, and we have also to trade together across. So we are converging to the regional level, to the continental level within this. So, and our architecture is always adaptable to accommodate even trading beyond. We have considered also the EPA agreements. The East African is within the trading with Europe, trading with America, and the rest. So that's why that architecture of the hassle-free payment integration takes care of the continental approach, national approach, and the rest of the world. Lastly, colleagues, for the Unified Payment Interface Platform, the ESC, we are working on. As the initial part, we have already achieved the central bank communicating, now the commercial banks. We did not forget the continent where we are. Not everybody is running onto the smartphone and having the digital devices. We know the digital divide situation we are in. That's why on our payment platform that we are now working on, we have to consider the future phones. There's some people, I have an example of that future phone. This is one of the oldest phone that is not on the internet, whereby the connection, we know our market, more than 70% of our people in SMEs are not yet on the smartphone. So that's why we have considered the USSD platform. The best payment platform that we have done a study around the world is within India and Brazil. If you look at the Indian stack, the UPI is the leading. So the ESC, we have anchored our focus and our direction towards that UPI India, and that is the one of the way we have come up to consider that since we have the students moving within the region. Some of them are not yet eligible to open up the bank account, but they should have the wallets. So that's why you see onto our architecture there is even the mobile wallets, there is the commercial banks, there is USSD. So this platform, we have now reached the level of now finalizing how it comes to sit within the national architecture and the regional architecture. So moderator briefly and the participants here within this session, this is the direction the ESC has taken to ensure that we consider from the bottom up. Considering the challenges we have within our environment makes us to now think of what should be the best single digital market are we going to use. We are not going to be like Amazon, Alibaba, or the way that they are trading on. But we know very well on the logistics side, buses are working. What are we doing with the transporters associations? We know very well the matatus are working within our region. What are we doing within that? So that private partnership engagement is the one we are doing within our context as the region, and ensuring that we can now facilitate the cross-border trade. The migration data shows us that more than 6 million people cross within our region in East Africa. So, Chairperson, this is the focus and the direction the ESC have taken. It's a 5-year project we have given ourselves, and we are anchoring onto the African Union and the direction that the Continental Free Trade Area is taking together with the African Union Commission. Thank you, colleagues. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We take note about the progress of East Africa community in establishing its digital market. As you mentioned, since it's part of this continent, I think we need to organize dedicated meetings really to discuss and to create coherence and harmonization between the different regions that we can achieve a continental digital single market. I think this takes me to the last question, which will be addressed to Mr. Dr. Gibson, is how can we raise awareness about the huge business opportunity coming in Africa with digitalization?
Thank you very much, moderator. I won't take our time because I really enjoy the presentation of Engineer Daniel from East Africa, and I'm hopeful that we can scale that across all African region. That is a great opportunity for businesses, really. Well, let me say this, that number one, responsive government policy that are implemented on ease of doing business creates huge opportunity, creates a lot of awareness that people need to invest or people need to take up solution. Okay, for example, in Nigeria, 1 gig of data now is going for 50 cents. It used to be $5. You can see the ease of doing business, rates have been slashed because the government is listening. So we can continue to improve on this to really help the uptake of businesses and create jobs. We need more jobs to be created. And then two, systems integration services for digitalization as the foundation for enterprise digital transformation. Data integration services, there are a lot of opportunities there. Financial services has been mentioned. Mobile banking, data payment solution can increase financial inclusion and improve access to financial services for the unbanked. Number 3, from what I have, digital transformation solution that enhance ease of doing business as well, e-applications, etc. Data analytics services for result-oriented business decision. Analytics services also help to create the opportunity and the awareness. Then risk, mitigating risk, because a research conducted by UNECA showed that there is a huge potential for the momentum, to be tracked over time, and that is why we need to take cybersecurity seriously. It has been found out based on that research that a 10% increase in cybersecurity maturity yields about 0.6% to 5.4% increase in per capita income, GDP of our countries. So if we mitigate those risks, even as the World Bank too mentioned and the African Development Bank, then we can see more trust and more uptake of activities even on digital platforms. This is very, very important. Adopting digital technology in agriculture too help a lot, okay? Like precision farming, e-marketplace, they can increase efficiency, improving livelihood for small-scale farmers. This will boost uptake of the activities on the digital market. Healthcare, e-health solutions can also be offered to provide quality healthcare services. I was impressed that in my village, there is a connection, the vaccine, and they have connection to the internet to really monitor activities, which is impressive. These are opportunities, even in the remote areas. Education as well, incorporating technology in education, such as online learning and e-textbooks, can improve access to education and increase literacy. Once you have those infrastructure in place, more solutions can be developed, customized to different localities, different languages. We should not forget that WISIS, one of the 12 action lines, project that we should defend our culture, promote our culture. So African local content could also be a source of opportunity and awareness for more digital activity. Energy, developing smart grids and renewable energy solutions can increase access to electricity, particularly in rural areas, and reduce dependence on fossil fuel, vis-a-vis the climate change issue. Okay? Transportation, adopting technology in transportation such as ride-hailing and smart traffic management system can improve mobility and reduce congestion in cities. And lastly, we're in the Industry 4.0, so we need to have this in perspective, Industry 4.0, where we have cutting-edge technologies. These are opportunities, robotics, artificial intelligence, automation, digitalization. This can improve efficiency seriously and reduce cost, and increase competitiveness for manufacturers. And most importantly, cut off corruption. You can eliminate corruption. I know many places where through World Bank intervention, things are digitalized and everything is transparent, and then corruption is eliminated completely. I've seen that, so it's possible. So these are opportunities that we can embrace. Thank you very much, moderator.
Thank you very much, Dr. Olofui. I think before I hand over to the two co-chairs to conclude the session, I open the floor. If there is any questions that we can take one or two questions before we conclude this session. I don't see hands. Is there any question? No? No. Yes, Mr. Guichard. His mic.
Je suis Guichard Sambou, de la CEAC, en charge des TIC. Ma question est adressée plus particulièrement auprès des partenaires. Dommage que Mike est parti là-bas. Donc, au niveau de la sous-région, dans le secteur de TIC, ce que nous avons constaté au niveau de l'Afrique centrale, nous avons des appuis des partenaires pour assurer la coordination de l'implémentation des projets d'infrastructure. Aujourd'hui, pour parler de la sous-région CEAC, en matière d'infrastructure filaire d'argent, nous disposons d'un plan d'action dans le cadre régional en matière de développement des infrastructures numériques. Et ce plan d'action, pour sa mise en œuvre, nécessite un cadre institutionnel sous-régional pour assurer la coordination des interconnexions entre les États membres et la mise en œuvre des infrastructures sous-tendent l'économie numérique. Nous savons par exemple dans le secteur des transports, dans le secteur des transports, dans le secteur des énergies, la BAD en particulier accompagne la sous-région dans le processus de coordination. Au niveau par exemple de la CEAC, nous avons des appuis que nous recevons auprès des partenaires pour accompagner les secteurs comme les transports sur des projets transnationaux. Mais la question que nous nous posons, pourquoi ce mécanisme-là n'existe pas dans le secteur des TIC? Parce qu'aujourd'hui, l'expérience a montré que les partenaires préfèrent travailler directement en bilatéral. Hein, c'est vrai que les projets qu'ils appuient en bilatéral, ce sont des projets qui sont contenus dans le master plan régional, mais les lignes directrices que nous avons établies sur le plan régional, pour s'assurer de leur prise en compte effective dans les États membres, il faudrait que nous, en tant que communauté économique régionale, nous puissions être impliqués. Donc, ce sont des questions que nous nous posons. Comment est-ce qu'on peut penser à... Et aussi, il y a un deuxième point que je voudrais soulever. Je sais que le représentant du Sénégal a soulevé de façon rapide, c'est le fait que aujourd'hui, lorsqu'on parle des infrastructures, que ce soit au niveau de nos États membres, à première vue, on pense au secteur des transports, au secteur de l'énergie. J'ai bien peur que dans cette deuxième phase du PIDA, que le même phénomène se produise que le problème que nous avons vécu dans la première phase du PIDA. Parce que le budget qui avait été alloué dans le secteur de TIC représentait 3% du budget global des infrastructures. Hein? Et aujourd'hui, lorsque nous voyons les ressources qui sont mobilisées sur le plan, que ce soit mondial, sur le plan continental, c'est vrai que sans énergie, on ne peut rien faire. Mais je pense aussi, sans TIC, on ne peut pas mettre en œuvre même cette zone de libre-échange continental. C'est un vecteur qui contribue à la mise en œuvre. Donc, quelles sont les actions que nous pouvons mener, nous qui sommes ici, hein, qui représentons le secteur de TIC, pour que, moi j'appellerais ça un malaise que nous ressentons. Hein, comment est-ce qu'on peut, quelles sont les actions que nous avons à mener, peut-être auprès des politiques? Est-ce que nous ne faisons pas assez de plaidoyer? Est-ce que tu réfléchis à autre point en fait? Voilà un peu les deux points sur lesquels je voulais intervenir. Merci.
Merci. Je vous remercie, Monsieur Guichard. Je pense que vos remarques elles sont pertinentes et c'est des questions qui se posent. Donc, le représentant de la Banque africaine de développement, il est parti parce qu'il a une autre session, mais on aura l'occasion de discuter avec ça. Donc, with this, it is my pleasure to hand over to the two co-chairs for the concluding remarks. I would start by Mr. Rogi from the World Bank.
Merci beaucoup. Et comme j'ai commencé en anglais, je vais terminer en français. Donc, je voulais d'abord remercier la Commission de l'Union africaine d'avoir organisé cet événement qui, je pense, est tout à fait nécessaire pour nous permettre de mieux nous coordonner pour atteindre cet objectif partagé, d'atteindre un continent africain en ligne à l'horizon 2030. Et je pense que ce qui est apparu très clairement à travers les échanges riches et les perspectives complémentaires des membres distingués du panel, c'est qu'il faut vraiment travailler à plusieurs niveaux, au niveau national, au niveau régional et au niveau continental, avec cet objectif de démultiplier, je devrais dire, les efforts, que ce soit du côté public, que ce soit du côté privé, que ce soit du côté des organisations continentales et sous-régionales. Et je voudrais peut-être terminer par ce dernier angle des opérations du niveau sous-régional. Je me félicite vraiment de la participation dans ce panel de son Excellence, Monsieur le Commissaire, et du représentant de l'EAC, justement parce que la nouvelle génération de projets régionaux que prépare la Banque mondiale, elle est vraiment articulée avec cette dimension sous-régionale. Nous préparons en ce moment au niveau de l'Afrique de l'Est un projet qui s'appelle IRDIP, en travaillant avec l'EAC. Et nous préparons en ce moment au niveau de l'Afrique de l'Ouest avec la commission ECOWAS un projet ouest-africain appelé WARDIP. Et les étapes suivantes, c'est de basculer sur le centre et sur la région sud de l'Afrique avec une vision commune de ce qu'est un marché numérique intégré, commune au niveau régional et commune au niveau continental. Et ce framework qui a été présenté avec le niveau connectivité, le niveau data, le niveau online, c'est une approche que nous cherchons à appuyer dans chacune des sous-régions pour pouvoir aboutir à un marché unifié numérique au niveau de l'Afrique, qui est l'objectif ultime de la transformation, stratégie de transformation numérique de l'Afrique 2020-2030 de l'Union africaine, que nous cherchons à voir se réaliser. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Monsieur Roger. Maintenant, je donne la parole à Monsieur Moses pour ses remarques.
Thank you. Mine also is, first of all, to thank the panelists for really providing us with all the information they have done. And also, it was an enriching session. I also want to thank you. Initially, I think you, the audience, I think initially it was 1 hour. It has taken more than 1 hour, but to have you still around shows the interest in the subject matter. I also want to thank the moderator, my colleague Suhila, for really taking us through this session. The time was short, but I think we met the objective of the session. I also want to thank the interpreters and all that have facilitated this session. Lastly, I just want to say that really is to call for continued collaboration among everyone, government, private sector, multilateral financial institutions. That's what will enable us to accelerate Africa's digital transformation. We have seen there is progress both at all levels, national, regional, and continental. So mine is just to call for continued collaboration so that we can take it further and accelerate the continent's digital transformation. I thank you.
Thank you, Moses. Now it's my turn to thank all panelists for all the ideas they shared with us, and thank you the participants for your participation. And with this, we come to the end of this session. Thank you all.
Hello? Hello?
We can have it.
Hello, excuse me. Distinguished participants. Hello, hello, excuse me. Hello, hello. Distinguished participants, we have a session which is actually started late. Can we kindly move out to make room for the next session? Hello, excuse me. Excuse me, excuse me. Can we please move out and make room for the next session? Can we please move out if we are not participating in the next session?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. If we can please clear the room. We have another session in the other room and we're really being disrupted, please. Thank you. If I can cordially ask you to exit. Thank you.
Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Can we settle, please? Can we settle, please, distinguished delegates? Can we settle? Can we settle down, please? We're beginning the session. Can we settle, because we have had participants waiting online for a very long time, so we need to start immediately. Yeah, so I won't go into any ado, given the circumstances of starting this session very late. So This session, as you know, and for those who were not aware, is a session that is on water investments for Africa, pathways for mobilization of 30 billion annually by 2030. That's the title of the session. It's a session which is hosted by AUDA, NEPAD, and GWP, and the AUC. So I will immediately call upon Dr. Toela to make some introductory remarks. Over to you, Dr. Toela.
Thank you very much, Laureen, and good afternoon to everyone, and especially to the people online. Sincere apologies for the delays in starting the session, but really happy that we do have people that are joining the meeting. From my side, I think on behalf of AUD and NEPAD, and also perhaps on behalf of GWP, I know Alex wanted to be here but is not able to join us today. Really just to thank everyone for your interest in the issues surrounding the water sector, and very specifically this idea of how we're going to mobilize $30 billion to address Africa's water agenda. AUD and NEPAD has been working very closely with the Global Water Partnership to promote and advance the water projects under the framework of PIDA, and more especially the Africa Water Investment Program. We have worked together to mobilize support in terms of getting more PIDA water projects into the portfolio. We have also worked over the last 2 years to develop a scorecard that would allow us to track investments into the water sector, because we feel it is important for us to be able to account for how our member states are making investments into the sector, identify where the gaps are, but also then be very clear about what the strategies that are needed to remedy the situation. For the current discussion today, we have a high-level panel that has been established under leadership of the government of Senegal, which is really looking at how to mobilize more investments into the water sector. And the discussion today really is centering around concrete actions and pathways to that $30 billion. We have a number of, I think, excellent experts that will help us to unpack this discussion in terms of the mobilization of these resources. And the expectation then is that we will come out of this session with clear recommendations and clear validation, I think, of some of the ideas around mobilizing the $30 billion. Beyond that, I think also the fact that we are having this meeting against the backdrop of the Dakar Financing Summit is not by accident. The Dakar Financing Summit itself is geared at mobilizing investments into the infrastructure sector in line with Africa's priorities, and therefore this discussion around the pathways to the 30 billion will also provide inputs into the discussions that we will have from tomorrow and Friday around the financing of infrastructure. Lastly, to mention that on Friday itself, we will have very specific sessions looking at a number of water projects in the region that are looking for financing, and we would like to present these projects with the help of the project sponsors so that we can also identify potential investors and begin to map out a strategy for how we will actually leverage the relevant resources for these projects. So with that, I will hand back to Laureen and thank everyone for their participation today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Toela. Yeah, so the person who's actually going to run the program is online. Physical participants, to just note that we are joined by more than 60 people who have been waiting online. So I would like to introduce Ahmed Elder, who is the Water, Climate Change and Gender Policy Advisor for the AUC, the African Union Commission, to run the program. Over to you, Ahmed.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Good afternoon. I think it's afternoon in Dakar now. And let me just welcome you all to this second Pan-African consultation meeting on AIP panel, the investment and finance. So I just allow me just to sign on what Dr. Tawila said from Abdel Nibat, and just to continue, as you said, in the sake of time. And thank you so much for the Republic of Senegal and the Kingdom of Netherlands for their support and leadership and co-chairing of this panel. So allow me now to ask Dr. Mohamed Diatta to deliver his speech. Is Sherpa to panel co-chair His Excellency President Macky Sall. The floor is yours, Dr. Mohamed.
Merci beaucoup, Ahmed. Je sais que nous allons aller très vite, étant donné que nous avons d'autres rendez-vous qui nous attendent dans la journée. Je voulais juste, à la suite de la première consultation de décembre, du 15 décembre, remercier à cette deuxième consultation et les souhaiter nos meilleurs vœux pour l'année 2013, de santé, mais surtout de paix. Mais également remercier surtout la contribution déterminante des parties prenantes lors de la première consultation qui a permis aux consultants d'élaborer un contenu assez soutenu de la première mouture du rapport qui a été proposé. Où nous demandons également aux consultants d'être très attentifs à ce que les messages et le contenu de ce rapport soient accessibles à travers un résumé exécutif à l'attention des décideurs politiques. Nous nous réjouissons fortement de l'évolution positive de ce rapport qui permettra d'avoir une production de référence sur la situation des investissements pour l'eau en Afrique. Il est vrai que des données existent, mais ce rapport a le mérite de pouvoir fédérer l'ensemble des données et de capitaliser l'ensemble des activités à l'échelle du continent africain et d'offrir une visibilité sur les points les plus problématiques, mais également les thématiques les plus cruciaux sur lesquelles nous devons travailler à l'avenir pour faire de l'investissement dans le secteur de l'eau en Afrique une grande réalité à travers tout le continent. Juste pour informer que le Sénégal est fortement impliqué dans la préparation de la conférence des Nations Unies qui va donner une place prépondérante à la question du financement des infrastructures pour l'eau, notamment en Afrique. Et juste également vous informer que le Sénégal a été choisi avant-hier pour co-présider le dialogue interactif numéro 4 intitulé L'eau pour la coopération. Il est vrai que nous avons des défis énormes en matière de financement d'ouvrages transfrontaliers, d'ouvrages communs entre les États, mais également à l'intérieur des États, comment adresser la question cruciale du financement des infrastructures pour l'atteinte des ODD à l'horizon 2030. Je pense que cela est d'autant plus important que nous allons, dans ce cadre-là, beaucoup mettre l'accent sur le financement des infrastructures transfrontalières et le rapport du panel sera le bienvenu à cet égard pour renforcer les messages à l'attention des dirigeants politiques. Je voulais, avant de terminer, remercier les Pays-Bas, la République du Tadjikistan pour cette confiance accordée au Sénégal pour la coprésidence du dialogue interactif numéro 4 où la question du financement sera adressée. Souligner que cette question de la coopération sera une des dimensions essentielles pour bâtir une résilience effective en Afrique face au changement climatique, mais également à travers le développement qu'engendrera ces infrastructures, une paix durable et un développement soutenu à l'échelle. Je voulais terminer en félicitant le secrétariat du panel, M. Alex Simawalabui, malgré sa contrainte et les contraintes technologiques, nous avons pu tenir cet événement aujourd'hui. Le remercier pour l'excellent travail en cours pour la finalisation de ce rapport, dont les travaux vont s'intensifier en direction de la conférence des Nations Unies 2023 et au-delà de 2023. Voilà, mesdames, messieurs, les messages que nous voulons adresser à l'ensemble des participants, tout en espérant que cette deuxième consultation permettra d'adresser les questions cruciales à améliorer pour qu'enfin nos dirigeants puissent avoir ce rapport et élaborer les commentaires qui viennent des différentes parties prenantes de ce rapport. Je vous remercie et souhaite plein succès à nos travaux de ce jour.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Mohammed Diatta. Although the English translation is not working, but I think we are grateful for your contribution and support throughout the work of this AIP panel. Let me now call upon our colleague from, or friend from Kingdom of Netherlands, Martin Kessler. I think you know also Netherlands is co-chairing this panel. So Mr. Martin Kessler is a senior water advisor of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Kingdom of Netherlands. The floor is yours now, Mr. Martin.
Thank you very much, and I hope that you all can hear me.
Yes, you can.
In our view, the high-level panel's objective is to provoke a step change in the financing of water investments in Africa at tens of billions of dollars more per year in packages of the right size and the right quality. That is an enormous challenge because today's water financing prospects, they look incremental at best. There's incremental space to take on more public debt, incremental space to reprioritize public expenditure, incremental private appetite to put money into water, and incremental prospects to increase ODA, and incremental space to raise more revenue from service delivery and from taxes. So that's 5 times incremental, and the question is, if you add that all up, will that produce a step change? Probably not. So where will the step change come from? What is the paradigm change and who will change that paradigm? We think that one place to start is the narrative. There is a mainstream narrative that suggests there is a planet A full of water problems, okay. And then there seems to be a planet B with financial institutions and companies and lots of solutions and lots of cash. And in that narrative, this cash and these solutions from planet B could flow to planet A, but only if the returns are good. Now that puts water in a corner separate from finance and separate from corporations where it should not be. And it puts finance and corporations in a position detached from water where they don't seem to have much future. Because we all inhabit the same planet, and water is as material to people as it is to the private and the finance sectors. That is also why water risk has been in the World Economic Forum's risk top 5 for 12 years straight, because it threatens a return on all investment. Day zero will strand all assets. But risks also work the other way. Investment itself, in industry, in food, in mining, they also are a source of risk. And often part of that risk gets transferred onto a public balance sheet. Degradation of water resources is the manifestation of that risk transfer. Now, mitigating these risks will mobilize finance and will involve investment in water. And it requires not just de-risking, but it requires a sharing of risks and rewards, we believe. It requires joint leadership from private and finance sectors, but definitely also from governments, who should make it their mission to provide water security for all as a basis for development. A whole of government mission, not just a water sector mission, an all of society mission. That's also why it's so important that this panel is co-chaired by heads of government. And please note, this is not just an African challenge, it is a challenge in many other continents as well. Now, the high-level panel report, we hope, will invite such leadership. That's the job. And in 50 days, we're counting down, the world will get together in New York for the UN 2023 Water Conference, which is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to mobilize the world to value water in all its decisions, to put our money where our mouth is. And I hope today's consultations will guide us in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Martin, and we do appreciate the support we have and the co-chairing of this panel. And hopefully Senegal and Kingdom of Netherlands will continue the support to UN Conference 2023. Thank you so much. Now let us move to the next agenda item, where we will, I will try to provide an overview. I think they said host this disabled participation screen sharing. Can you please allow me to share the screen? Wow. Can you put it in view? Okay, thank you so much. Let me just provide a reflection of the outcome of the inaugural meeting of the high-level panel expert advisory group. This has been inaugurated during the Stockholm World Water Week, August 28, 2022, and on the sidelines of the World Water Week, as I said, convened by AUC and the government of Senegal and Netherlands. The high-level panel expert advisor group formally commenced its support to the panel in developing the high-level report, as we are discussing now, an investment action plan. They had many monthly meetings and reviews of the report in many iterations. So the key outcomes could be, go ahead please, next slide. The panel, to mobilize increased participation of the private sector in financing of water, and to target concessional finance, and to untap also potential of development banks to investment in Africa water and sanitation, and also to engage other ministers, because the water is also cross sectors, Minister of Finance, Foreign Affairs, and Defense, and other sectors. And to advise African governments to make water as a priority and to put it as a higher national agenda, and to consider barriers across gender transformation. Next slide, please. In the sake of time, I would like to go very quick on this overview. Next slide, please. And to consider AIP, PIDA, Water Investment Scorecard, as a significant tool to aid in the mobilization of the resources. One before, why are you? To use political clout of panel to mobilize structure and institutional reforms. I think this is a high-level panel, so they can easily instruct and direct the water sector to reform itself, and to consider the role of innovation in water sector, to consider investability of water solution for rural areas, and also to consider the PIDA corridor approach is a strategic framework that prioritizes regional projects that translate fully the African Union vision under Agenda 2063, and to recognize the importance of information sharing and collaboration. Next slide, please. And GMB data to show that there are no African countries on track. So this is a real bottleneck. We are not on track on the SDGs. And investment in African water infrastructures in 2018, 5.6 billion. This is private sector contribution only 2%. Water sector requires 5% of GDP to invest in sector, and to be invested in the sector. Actual investment is only now 1%. So we have to mobilize the private sector. This is a potential for the finance and investment of water. So there are three challenges and three opportunities to mobilize investments. One, in the three African countries have no long-term investment plans for water. This has to be addressed. And weak performance in monitoring and weak data in the sector. Also, no clarity on cost recovery mechanisms for water. So I think these are some areas, some of the challenges that we have to address. Next slide, please. Challenges are also limited public finance needs to be by public sector funding, also the private sector investment. The challenges experienced in water sector include poor regulations and policies and lack of policy coherence, as well as poor creditworthiness of the sector and poor tariffs and poor project preparation. So we have a problem here in Africa in project preparation and bankable projects. Critical success factor for water sector projects could be development, financial institutions, ability to influence stakeholders, focused use of limited grant funding to deal in private sector funding, collaboration between stakeholders, and applying a programmatic approach to scale up. Next slide, please. The three key opportunities is the potential of the panel to mobilize reforms. I think this is, as you said, this is the highest level, the head of states, and head of states can request reform from, in fact, they can instruct reform for their ministries. The untapped potential of national public development bank to invest in the sector. There are many development banks in the continent. This is a critical source, also instrumental for cross-sector projects and mitigating risk. To target also concessional finance for utilities and municipalities that can repay debt and release public finance for the areas that need it the most. Next slide, please. Next slide. To explore how to establish African water as an investable asset class. So within the 30 billion annual investment requirement for water, there is a possibility of greater public PPP, public-private finance, for governments, investees, and development financiers to adopt a different approach and tackle head-on the climate adaptation needs of the continent. And you saw the water at the center also of the climate change adaptation and resilience. Water capital mobilization at this scale is a solvable problem and is being solved routinely in many parts of the world. So we have to learn also how others did it. From a domestic asset owner's perspective, there are three major initiatives with the goal of establishing African water as an investable asset class. Number one is the African Green Infrastructure Investment Bank and the model law for institutional investor PPP, and a high-level roadmap that brings together best practices and regulation that may be used to attract high volumes of investment into the sector. I think this may be the last one, isn't it? I hope so. Explore blended finance. As the global community requires an annual investment of 229 billion to reach SDG 6. So the capital is available, but the key obstacle to assessing it is aligning project design to assess requirements. I think the private sector needs to view the water sector as investable and bankable opportunity. I think bankability is the key issue, and also commerciality is the key issue here to bring water as a investable sector. The current concern of the private sector includes the lack of strong return on investment. I think this is we have to address. We have to be. We have seen private sector progress in other similar sector by using the blended finance. So this is an opportunity we have to explore. The water sector needs to consider blended finance as an approach for the entire sector, not individual projects. And the blended finance approach is effective and can work for water sector, but it requires the collaboration of governments, financiers, project owners, and development organizations. Ahead. Yeah, it seems that I navigate very quickly on these slides because I would like to give Guy an opportunity to present the report. So if no other slides, then we can move. This is just an example from what we have here in Africa, Kigali water. And we can look to what we have here in Africa and try to replicate and scale up. I think this is from Kigali water supply, and I think I see some on the emails, some exchange, pitch with Guy that how can he bring this experience from Rwanda. So learning from others in the region and beyond, it is a good practice we have to learn from. Now allow me just to ask Guy to present the report. Guy, the floor is yours, and I think this is the thing that we are waiting for. Just to present the report, and then we are going to break down in groups after that.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmed. Really appreciate that introduction. I'm trying to share my screen, but I'm not being able to at the moment. So just ask the organizers to either share the PowerPoint or give me access. Okay, I have access now. Thank you. All right. All right. I hope you can see the screen now. Okay, good. Well, my name is Guy Hutton. I'm an independent consultant, been brought in to lead the drafting of this report, but it really is a very broad-based consultative process, and I feel we've really had a lot of input so far. And this is the second consultation of the Africa-wide group.
Mike, I think maybe there's something, or I am the only one.
So when I was if you are on the English channel, it's better to go back to having no channel because the sound is a lot clearer then. So please indicate if there's still a problem with the sound. Yes, so this is the second consultation. We received a lot of input from this group at the inception report phase. And since then, the report has gone through 2 drafts and has been circulated last week for further input. And this Friday, the 3rd of February, is the deadline for comments. So we look forward to hearing from you in written form, as well as any comments you provide today. So the purpose of this report is really to start thinking about water finance in a different way. The number of $30 billion a year annually for Africa seems a really enormous number. And it is compared to current investment levels. But we've got a dream of what is feasible if the water sector makes some reforms, if there's a few some factors or conditions in the broader enabling environment which enables finance to be drawn to the water sector. So we've got to think differently about how we use scarce public resources, how we can better use declining bilateral ODA levels, how we can access trillions of dollars circulating in global investment funds, how we can have the water sector attract climate adaptation funds. So there's a lot to discuss and a lot to present in this report. So this report is supposed to galvanize, it's supposed to challenge, and we are targeting the heads of state and top levels of African government, as well as the heads of international finance institutions, including institutional investors, where we can mobilize very significant funds in the future. So to be successful, we have to aim high. And as the government of the Netherlands representative said, we've got to invite high-level leadership in the issue. So the tentative title is Actionable Pathways to Mobilize $30 billion a year to achieve water security and sustainable sanitation in Africa. This really spells out what we're trying to do. And I'll be going through the actionable pathways during this presentation. So what the report contains, it contains an introduction explaining the importance of the issue and why we need to think differently about financing SDG 6 and beyond SDG 6, because water is used by, is important and used in so many other sustainable development goals. So we'll be looking at the importance of water security and sustainable sanitation for growth, economic growth and stability in Africa. We'll be looking at progress on water security and sustainable sanitation in Africa. We'll be looking at a range of finance sources, and we'll be looking at what can be done based on evidence to attract finance to the water sector. So Chapter 2 spends time going into the enabling environment, both broadly in terms of political leadership, the readiness of the financial sector, overall governance, and peace and political stability, and then into specific opportunities and bottlenecks in the water sector. So we look at all these issues here, which need to be improved in order to attract finance to the water sector. And then we go through 3 major complementary pathways, and we have targets for African governments, for investors, to solve the water security challenge in Africa. So first of all, we've got to know where these major sources of additional funds will come from in order to frame the report properly. And we really need to start by making the sector more investable through having efficient water services. So it is possible to lower service unit costs and improve bill collection in water utilities, for example, to make service providers more financially viable. And this will also be done in some circumstances to raise tariffs if the cost recovery level has not been achieved, depending on the population that it services. There'll be climate and international funds. There are new donors, so the BRICS, the country aid programs and development banks. There's public finance, which will be possibly limited in many countries, what can be raised, but provides an important foundation for other types of finance. And then there's other sources which we need to explore, which are already being used in many countries, is taxation on depletion and pollution of water resources. So what could be called internalizing the externalities by incentivizing producers who use water to reduce their pollution and reduce their extraction levels. And if they can't, then they get taxed so that the downstream users can be compensated adequately. So also there's additional repayable financing, and this is from international investors, and I'll say something more about this, and also national and commercial banks, which could bring more of their attention to the water sector. And key for repayable finance is bankability and credit worthiness. And from many contexts, we need to talk about blended finance, where the public sector funds can attract private sector into investments in this space. So the 3 pathways that we've designed are firstly around strengthening the enabling environment and achieving more impactful spending. Pathway 2 is domestic resource mobilization, and Pathway 3 is mobilizing global and continental finance, which could be attracted to the water sector. And for all of these, we need significantly greater political support in order to be successful in these three pathways. So it cuts across all of them. Within each pathway, we have 5 steps. I won't detail these now, but we go through these because it has to be actionable, it has to be feasible and practical. So we give some ideas for how this can be implemented. So in Pathway 1, we need to map the enabling environment and understand bottlenecks and strategize how to address them, prepare and implement. So some of the actions that we need are listed here. I won't go through them in detail, but they've been well monitoring initiatives, including the GLASS, the SDG monitoring, and now the AIP scorecard, which has been piloted in 10 countries and will be expanded beyond that this year. So also we need to talk about actions to strengthen water providers, and there's a long list of what can be done, which needs to be adapted and implemented in each and every water and wastewater provider in Africa. So Pathway 2, domestic resource mobilization. So we need proper finance strategies for achieving water security and sustainable sanitation. Without these, the sector will remain fragmented and will not achieve its potential. So first we talk about the most important sources, which I've already touched on, and some additional ones. So we've got to look at productive sectors, the industrial and agricultural sectors for further investment. Local governments can provide additional resources based on their local tax revenues. And the others I've already talked through. Sources also include these. There's a lot out there, and we've got to see in each country, in each context, which ones are most realistic. But debt financing, we have some doubts about whether that'll really provide, in terms of national debt financing, whether it'll provide much additional resources given the debt situation of many countries in Africa. And there are 3 sub-pathways, so we can increase the overall finance coming to development through attracting it to the water sector. We can compete with other development sectors to get the fair share for water security, and we can increase the efficiency and equity of existing and new spending, which I've already touched upon. So Pathway 3 is around mobilizing global and continental finance. So some of the ones that will be sort of touched on in the report are institutional investors, the trillions of dollars available in continent-wide and global investment funds, such as pension funds. There's climate funds, which have been discussed in the recent COP meetings. And 17% of the adaptation funds are earmarked for water. However, there's a real funding gap there, with the government stepping up to around 10% of the ask. Just going into a little bit more detail of what we need to mobilize global and continental finance, and it's relevant too for domestic finance, is we need to develop a project pipeline with strong rationale for international and investor funds. We need to increase the familiarity of international investors with the water sector, understanding their needs and making the case better. We need to implement supportive legal and regulatory measures. Without regulation, the private sector will be very reticent to actually come in and invest in the water sector. So these are absolutely critical. And then implement measures to increase operator financial viability and improve creditworthiness. We know how to do this, but it can be a challenge when the capacity is very weak. But certainly there is a lot of best practice out there. We need to develop and implement financial instruments that are fine-tuned to the development context. And we'll be speaking later about making water an investable asset class in one of the breakout groups. This is in the context of blended finance. And so there's a lot that can be done to simplify transaction efficiency and make it lower cost. And finally, close the deal. We've got to matchmake the suppliers of finance with those demanding finance. And there are platforms out there, but not enough for what we need. We have sort of graphics which can help us in our conversations around blended finance, looking at different types of arrangement depending on project size and project risk. We need to sort of understand what are the opportunities at different project risk levels and who are the players who are likely to come in and support a blended finance arrangement. In the report, we plan to have proposed targets. Here are some illustrating what we might have. So we'll be challenging African countries to adopt targets related to many of the aspects I've spoken about. And then we'll have some also for international finance institutions. These are proposed. It'll be for discussion and tabling at the meetings in New York in March. And in further meetings in 2023. So the final chapter looks into the next steps. So we need the reader to understand what is really needed and how they embark on this journey. We need to importantly identify champions inside and outside the water sector, including political support. There's some foundational work which needs to be undertaken, such as project pipelines, advocacy, research, and so on. As we're running short of time, I'll just say something briefly about the discussion groups that we'll be going into. So in group one, we'll be looking at ways of improving the report as it is. What are your perceptions about the major and resolvable bottlenecks to investing in water security in Africa? Are the major sources of additional finance listed? And which ones need greater emphasis and exploration? Do these three pathways make sense? And are there any targets you would like to propose? So there may be insufficient time to get all your comments, so please do, if you have received the report, you'll have my email address on the report, and you can share your comments directly with me. So in discussion group 2, John Aikida, who's water practice manager for Castelia, we are going to be looking into the question of whether water can become an investable asset class, and in relation to specific blended finance projects and learning what can be done to scale successful projects up across the continent. And then group 3 will be led by Catarina Fonseca, who's advisor to the government of the Netherlands. We've been proposed that we break out one of the major potential finance sources, which are those who are polluting and using water, to tax them, to impose compliance fines, which could raise billions of dollars across the continent. Of course, this is challenging, but the polluter pays principle is universally adopted or understood, and we want to sort of dig into this pathway as well, this potential pathway, and see how it can be implemented. So some of the questions in that group will be how relevant and realistic it is, what impact it might have on water quality and availability, what revenues it might raise, and how could it be successfully implemented. So with that, I'll pass back to Dr. Ahmed, I think, to break us into the groups.
Thank you so much, Guy. And this is a report, and this is the three scenes or topics for the three groups. Group 1, existing pathways, as he said, and this will be facilitated by Laureen. And Group 2, internalizing course is Katarina. And Group 3 will be facilitated by John. Please, you can make the breakout session, and then you can join the group that we feel best you can contribute. It's now okay. Everyone knows where to be, where to.
Ahmed, is it okay if I come in just to explain?
Our colleagues ask where are the links.
Yes, can I just explain? Ahmed, is it okay if I just explain the links?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to explain that Group 1, which is the existing pathways, and that is the group that is going to be moderated by Guy. For that group, please remain in plenary. If you want to take part in that discussion, please stay in the plenary in this webinar. And this group, Group 1, is going to be the only group that will have French translation available. So if you're a French speaker, please stay in the plenary. For Group 2, which is going to be moderated by Katarina, I'm going to put a link in the chat. Please click on that link and you will go to a new Zoom meeting. And for Group 3, which is on the blended finance and is going to be moderated by John Ikeda, that is also on a separate link, which is going to be put in the chat. So you will follow that link to join the discussion on the blended finance. So you can choose which group you want to be part of, but if you are a French speaker, please stay in the plenary group.
Yes. If you are French, stay in the plenary group. If you are want other groups, the links will appear on the chat. Just click on the link and join the group 1 or 2. French in 1, and also if you would like to join, stay on this link. I hope now all clear. You have about 63, and we have about 6 or 7, I think, in the room. So we have about more than 50 outside the room. So we have the link now for Group 2. Go to the chat and check the link. So we have now for Group 3. The link is there. Please go and join. I hope we have a physical presence in Group 2 and Group 3.
All right. If that's the case, Dr. Ahmed, can I start with the group one here in the plenary?
Please go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Well, it's a small challenge to moderate a group remotely when there's many participants in the room. But I understand, Laureen, you are in the room and able to help. So please do use the microphone so that hopefully I'll be able to hear whatever is discussed in the room. But really, this is a chance. You don't have to use the questions on the screen. We're just seeking your feedback as you see fit. Many of you will have had the report circulated to you last week, and you've learned what are the main elements of the report in this presentation. There's obviously a lot more detail in the report, and possibly different emphases in the report, but I hope that I emphasize the most important points in the presentation. So I can't currently see the group, but please do take the microphone and make your comments, whether you're online or whether you're in the room.
If you are off the line, then you can just if you are talking remotely, you can just raise your hand.
Guy, I just want to say I can see the attendees. There's 31 attendees here. So if anybody wants to speak, please just put your hand up and we can give you rights to speak.
Svetlana and Guy, for the physical participants, I'll also let you know if anyone's hand is up. We have one hand up for the physical participants. Can she submit?
Yes, please go ahead. And please do say who you are, which organization you represent before you make your point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Guy, and thank you, Laureen, for giving me the floor and for the excellent presentations. And I'd also like to say hello to Dr. Ahmed. It's been a long time that we didn't meet. Actually, I was, when you were presenting, you were talking about the integrated corridor approach. And this is a very interesting thing that we talk about when we talk about the PIDA projects, and also here when we talk about the AIP. So how can you see the integrated corridor approach to be incrusted in the water security in Africa? And here I'd like to propose a project that actually I have submitted to Alex, and it's a PIDA project called Establishment of a Navigation Line between Lake Victoria and the Mediterranean Sea. And it's mainly on cooperation beyond the river, on tourism, on exchanging trade and socio-economic development. So is this kind of projects under the umbrella of the EIP? This is my first question. The second one regarding the projects themselves. I think that there has to be, like it has been in the PIDA PAP2, an eligibility criteria for the projects. So is that well formulated in the report? I think that those are my two questions that are reflecting on question number one. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I didn't hear your name or organization.
Excuse me.
Maybe it's,
I was very enthusiastic about talking and I forgot to identify myself. My name is Tahani Slade. I am head of Central Department for External Cooperation in the Ministry of Water Resource and Irrigation in Egypt. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. Maybe I could ask someone who's more familiar with the integrated corridor concept to speak about that and what projects are eligible. But certainly the purpose of this report is not to go into a specific financing mechanism or project. We refer to them, but we can't really give further detail, such as what you asked. Yeah, but maybe bilaterally, because this is not really the topic of the report, maybe bilaterally, someone could follow up with you who can answer your question. But thank you anyway for your question. Okay, do we have any other questions?
Guy, maybe if I can just tell the attendees that at the bottom of your screen, you should be able to see a hand up button, an icon. So if you have a question, you can click on that button and your hand will be up, and then we will be able to give you the opportunity to speak. If you're not able to see the button, then you can always just put your name in the chat and just say that you want to ask a question, and we'll unmute you that way.
Oh, now is the opportunity. There may be questions you have which are not on the screen, such as how we're going to use the report, what opportunities we have to disseminate it, and we have others online who will be able to answer those questions. But please, just anything that is on your mind, I think we have an opportunity to raise it now.
Guy, we have
Okay,
a question
I see.
from Simon. Yes, Simon, please go on.
Okay, thank you very much. Hi, Guy. This is Simon Thor. We worked together a long time ago, and looking at investments in Africa. And my question is about stranded assets and non-functional infrastructure in many parts of Africa. In some surveys we have done, between 25 and 50% of investments on the ground are non-functional, either partially or completely. Don't you think that this becomes a major, retardant to further investment? They cannot be made to work in the first place, and why would anyone want to continue, so to say, throwing good money after that?
Great, thank you, Simon. Yeah, I welcome that question. That is something that we've really tried to put up front in the report, and you'll see from the from the major sources we identified, making better use of existing assets is the most important, because otherwise, as you say, we'll be throwing good money after bad. So it's a big issue. It's really hard to address it, because we're talking entire systems that are not working to promote the use of the sustainability of existing assets. So we're putting that up front. We know many of the solutions, but the question is how we're going to implement those solutions. Sometimes investors just prefer to start with a green field rather than trying to repair existing assets. But we need to do the math. We need to understand whether it makes more sense to rehabilitate and improve what is there before we start building new assets. So certainly it's a focus of the report. But if you see ways in which it can be highlighted more strongly, then do please communicate with me directly. Thank you. Does anyone? Oh, I see maybe another hand. Okay. Mr. Mkuzo Chongo, would you like to?
Yeah, sure, Guy. Hi, my name is Mkuzo Chongo from Zambia. I am the program manager for the Zambia Water Investment Program. Yeah.